What's up, everyone? Hello, and welcome back to Game with Everyone on YouTube. I hope everyone's doing great, and you're awesome, and you're wonderful, and Gundam Sandrock wants to remind you, like, comment, subscribe. So, thank you very much for being here. Dr. Crouch, so excited to have you back. How you doing, man?
Hi. Hi. Good to be back.
Yeah, it is super exciting. So we got together and for a little bit of what this is about. So I had a one of my viewers throw a message my way, and he was like, "Hey, you know what I'm really interested in is how people use this technique called DARVO in trolling and stuff like that." And so I was like, "Oh, that's really interesting. I wonder if I can find examples of that happening in games and stuff." So I went and I read, and I asked our very good friend Dr. Crouch if he knew anything about it because he is.
I'm a child psychologist.
There you go. Because Dr. Crouch is a trained child psychologist. And I was like, hey, he knows the psychology stuff. He can help me out. So there you go. If you don't mind, Dr. Crouch, would you throw out a little bit of your credentials just for the people at home? Whatever you're comfortable with is fine. So they know where we're coming from and your expertise and that sort of thing. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I have a specialty in child psychology. I work in hospitals in Europe, and I've been doing child psychology now for a long time. I don't even want to get into the how long it's been. That'll put the age on me. But I am also an author. I write books for kids that teach them critical thinking skills and emotional regulation through CBT therapy workbooks for kids.
Yeah, they are fantastic. You can find those. The book series are Beyond Belief and Pixel's Big Book of Feelings. And we'll put links to those down in the description below, so you can go find them on Amazon. And I'll have links for all that stuff down in the description below. And hang out with Dr. Dad over on Facebook, where you can follow and see lots of posts. And check out his website, raisingaskepticalkid.com, where you can find lots of cool resources like free worksheets for kids to teach them critical thinking skills. It's awesome. One more.
Let me add just one little thing to that too, which is that I've been adding this new thing to the website called pseudoscience experiments for kids, where you can actually like test pseudoscience claims together and practice pseudoscience debunking and critical thinking together with your kids.
No
So
way. That's so
that's
cool.
been a new feature, and I'm really psyched about it.
That
Use it fun.
is so awesome. I love it. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about Darvo by Gaming with Everyone and Dr. Dad, the crazy, wacky pair we are. This is fantastic. So we're going to start with my favorite thing, data. Okay, so that's where we're going to begin with is data. And so first we're going to talk about what Darvo is. I know the what, the who, the why, and then we're going to give examples of Darvos in games, debate, and your personal life, your real life, your relationships. And I want to start with a why do we want to do this video? So yes, I got a viewer request to do it, and it was a very good idea from them. And I made it way more than what they asked for because I'm an insane person. And the thing is, is that when I started to read about it, I found this paper by Harsey and Frade, and they talked about how in that paper that research shows that education about Darvo does not negate entirely its effectiveness, but it does reduce the effect. And so that's kind of why we're here. We're here to give some examples of Darvo and what it is and where you can see it. We're going to try to start off light with examples from like games and, maybe you see it on online trolling and stuff like that. And then we're going to talk about how it shows its more ugly side in relationships and in abuse and stuff like that. So trigger warning here at the headset. I just want everyone to be clear. To talk lightly about abuse by the end of this video. So I'll do my best, okay, to keep that as cool as we can. But we are going to cover it because it matters. And this was one of the tables from their paper. The dark bar is with no Darvo education, and the light bar is with a Darvo education. So believability of the victim goes up slightly if people know about Darvo ahead of time, and then they see or hear or read about a situation. So this experiment essentially gave people situations where there was a perpetrator and a victim, and then the description of the situation, engaged in DARVO tactics. And so if they knew about it ahead of time, then they believed the victim a little bit more and they believed the perpetrator a little bit less, which was pretty good. And then in terms of perceived abusiveness, they perceived the victim as slightly less responsible for their own abuse or abuse of the perpetrator, and the perpetrator is slightly more responsible for the abuse than otherwise. So it may be a subtle difference, but I do think it's a difference that matters. I think it's a difference that will matter more with education. They talked about in the paper that one of the limitations they had is that they couldn't give people like a full, huge course on it, just like a crash course. And that matters, because the more education you have, the better. So what is DARVO then? Well, DARVO is this method for deflecting blame. In the Harzi paper, they define it as, quote, when used, a perpetrator denies or just minimizes the harms of any wrongdoing they do, attacks the victim's credibility, and then will reverse those victim and offender roles so that the perpetrator is assuming the victimized position and declaring the victim to be the perpetrator. There are 3 parts to this, and they're often used all together, not just one. So we're going to see denial of blame, and this can take a lot of different forms. Some more subtle ones are things like admitting blame but emphasizing previous good behavior or playing the hero. So they may deny that it may be okay, I did it, but when they deny blame, it may be I didn't do it. It could just be a staunch, flat, yeah, that wasn't me. They could have chocolate on their face and be like, I didn't eat those cookies. Or or it might be a denial that any harm was done. Yeah, okay, I was there, but, nothing bad actually happened. That wasn't. I look at all these good things that I do. I couldn't have been me. So they'll play the hero. Then they'll have some sort of an attack. So this can be things like, it's actually your fault. I'm going to tone police you or outrage manage you. And then they're going to reverse the victim and the offender role. So they're going to highlight some sort of past suffering that they've had and play the victim, and then they're going to try to reverse it and make the other party, the actual victim, the true perpetrator. Well, it's actually all their fault because, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we kind of have this weird, horrible amalgamation of 2 recognizable fallacies in arguing, right? The ad hominem fallacy, where we attack someone else as opposed to any evidence or without evidence, and a tu quoque fallacy, where we say, well, it's you too, right? Maybe it's me, but it's also you. Or I'm not really that bad because you're horrible. That's right.
One thing I would add to that too is that almost everybody who gets accused of doing something wrong will kind of their knee-jerk reaction is to be kind of defensive and deny it initially. I think what sets this apart is that most people who deny that they've done something wrong will then kind of stop and reflect and maybe have a discussion about it and think about what actually happened. But here, what really sets this apart is that the next step is, okay, I'm going to attack you if you try to accuse me of doing something that I shouldn't have done. And that's really one of the things that's sort of a hallmark of this.
Yeah, and that sets it apart from that kind of everyday interaction of, hey, that was a really crappy thing. And she just said, wait, what? I didn't do anything crappy. I was just trying to da-da-da-da-da. And then they sort of explain themselves. It's not just explaining yourself. It's literally like having the egg on your face and being like, I didn't break that carton of eggs. That wasn't me. And also, you're a bad person. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. More data. So does this work, right? So we have this technique engaged in, and the real question next is, well, does it work? And the answer to that is it's complicated. So when I was reading through, and the citations are all going to be in the description of the video, and the citations are at the end of this presentation, so you'll see them all. I have them. I want to be very transparent. Please go check them all out too. They were fantastic reads. Everybody who put them together did a tremendously awesome amount of work. So please go beyond this video and do more of your own research on it. It was really, really cool. So in reading about it, I found that whether or not it works is really complicated. I had an article that said, well, it's a really effective tactic for a narcissist because it can confuse the hell out of their victims and it can shame them or sometimes even frighten them into silence. And that's very troubling, right? People who are victims of abuse should speak out about their abuse, and they should have the freedom to do so without repercussion. In the Harzi and Frade paper, they talked about how the results of their experiment revealed that the perpetrator's use of DARVOs does influence observer perceptions. It leads individuals to view the victims as more responsible for the abuse against them and as more abusive. But the the use of DARVO also causes the perpetrator to be seen as less responsible for the abuse they committed and less abusive in general. And some of these effects can be mitigated by knowledge of DARVO, like we talked about before. But what's really interesting is that the analysis revealed that DARVO decreased the extent to which the perpetrators are viewed as believable too. So although it does have some benefit to them and it harms the victim's credibility, it also harms their credibility because it's kind of a transparent tactic. It's very aggressive, and in the paper they talk about it being a very aggressive thing, a socially aggressive behavior, and that kind of annihilates their believability. And you can see that here, where when the perpetrator engages in DARVO is in blue and not is in gray. And so if the perpetrator engaged in DARVO, then the believability is much less than if they had not, or not much less, but it is less than if they had not. But the perpetrator also has significantly less believability when they engage in this behavior than not. It was really interesting. But responsibility matters here too, because when the perpetrator engages in DARVO, then the victim is always seen as more responsible or more co-abusive, as opposed to not. But the perpetrator is seen as less responsive or less abusive, as opposed to not. And so it is detrimental to them in their overall credibility, but it does what it needs to do, which is muddy the waters. So then why engage in it? If it is detrimental to them overall in the long run, why do it? Well, because DARVO works better the more we are invested in people. The person is important to us, or they are close to us, if they're authority, power, even physical attractiveness. I found a paper that talked that, to cite, that said that analyses have shown attractive individuals are usually perceived as more socially skilled, mentally healthy, intelligent, and they accrue better social experiences overall. So all of these things can contribute to somebody appearing more believable and being able to get away with this incredibly narcissistic behavior. And things like the halo effect, right, is something that when we were going over our notes, you brought up, Dr. Dad, the thing that when we see positive traits in people, we are more likely to attribute more, yeah?
I would definitely like to touch on that a little bit about the halo effect, because I think it's fascinating, and it's the sort of thing that once you understand what it is, you kind of see it everywhere. You see how it's influencing people, and kids can understand it too, because it's just so simple. But the idea is this: if you, on the surface, look at somebody and you see some positive trait, they're attractive, they look wealthy, they have great hair, very flashy smile, whatever it might be. If you look at them and they have at least one really good, outstanding trait, you're likely to just impute a bunch of other traits onto them that are positive too. And this is one of the reasons why certain people can probably get away with these kinds of tactics better than others, because they have like a doctor in front of their name, right? Or they're just inherently attractive, or there's just they are somebody who is very wealthy and they're flashing that. The halo effect really comes into play in moments like this, and people can manage to engage in these kinds of tactics even transparently. But as long as people view them in a positive way for something else, they can really forgive a lot of these kinds of techniques from them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And like we talked about before, it also awards them some social advantage. In Hardy's paper, they said, for those who have committed abusive acts, the ability to influence how others perceive them and their victims is indispensable. Convincing bystanders no abusive behavior took place, or that if something did occur, it was not harmful, which we talked about in the beginning, remember? And that the victim is untrustworthy, gives that perpetrator a clear advantage in both social networks and in the legal system. And we're going to talk about that by the end. If successful, the perpetrator can avoid blame and then avoid disadvantageous outcomes. The victim's account is doubted and ultimately is disregarded in favor of the perpetrator's narrative. This is where we get into sort of a bias here, where once we begin to believe this person and their narrative and their story, we will start to question, doubt, or reject evidence that may indicate otherwise. And that is a huge problem here.
Good old confirmation bias rears its ugly head again.
Now, here's another reason why people might engage in DARVO, though, that has nothing to do with advantage. And this is really interesting, because not only did the article by McGee discuss this, But I also, ahead of this, I have polled my audience and communities that I'm in. I asked them for examples, and I asked them for stories they could tell, and have you experienced this behavior and things like that. And I have heard this from from them, from people who have diagnoses of narcissists. They've said that sometimes it's a reflexive engagement because the reality of their behavior is very shameful. Don't want to be hated or blamed for doing something wrong. And instead of taking the correct approach and engaging with their wrongdoing, apologizing, and seeking restoration, they just jump right into this denial tactic. And once they're in it, they maintain that and they just hang on to it until they're pushing everyone away around them. And it's very harmful and something they have to kind of learn their way out of. So I thought that was super interesting.
It is, and I love the fact that there were people out there who are willing to put themselves out there and say, I have some of these tendencies, maybe I have a diagnosis. And narcissism is one of those things that a lot of people who don't have it or haven't been around it, what they don't understand about it is that it's actually pretty distressing a lot of the time for the person that has it. There's a lot of shame involved. The sensitivity, the emotional sensitivity involved, the constant upkeep and need to validate and constantly be reinforcing your sense of self is stressful and exhausting. And it's one of those things that is really hard to understand if you've never been around it or haven't had it yourself. And so I'm really glad these people reached out and said something because I think it helps us understand this kind of technique and the
Yeah.
people that engage in it.
Absolutely. And they were super kind. I got a lot of people in communities that I'm in to share not just examples that they found from games, but almost all the examples that we're going to talk about come directly from them, from people in gaming with everyone, from people in other communities that I'm in. So they were really willing to share and open up. And of course, okay, I'm going to portray these anonymously. So you can take them with a grain of salt, right? I'm not, hey, here's the person, da da da. And these are, and, some of these are anecdotal in a sense, but here's the, this is why I wanted to make sure we brought so many citations with us to back this stuff up. Because when my community member said this and then I read this, I was like, yep, there it is. Okay, now I got it. So now, and I've done my best to try to match these with all this firsthand, so we know that I'm not just making this up, right? And if I am, you can call me on it. You're a doctor. See, it's fine.
Yeah, that's my job.
So the other thing is they get away with it because of things like primacy and recency. And this is another thing that we discussed when we were getting our notes together, is that the first and last accounts tend to stick better. And people who use DARVO will try to prime their audience by getting their side in first and then gain more sympathy by being the most recent victim. And both of those can compound because, again, when we get their story first, we get that bias. We get that cognitive bias of, oh, yeah, this is the first thing I heard. I want to try to believe this as much as possible. So let's be critical of the evidence that comes after. And so oftentimes um this is the this is where you get situations where, like, you'll call somebody on something, or there will be an abusive behavior taking place or whatever, and people will call the cops on themselves because they feel like it gives them this primacy effect, that it will make them more believable, or they'll call the cops on you before you can call the cops on them. Is one of my viewers put it to me, is they had a situation where they're going to involve the authority and the other person called the authorities first because they caught
Yeah,
wind of it.
and I would also say that like if you're in a public dispute, like like online, right? And there's starting to be a big dispute. The people who sort of go heavy first, who start making accusations, really extreme accusations first, you know, there's a primacy effect to that. Like they're the ones who are showing themselves to be aggrieved. They're the ones who are really bringing up all kinds of problems. And the primacy effect for people that are following that would lead them to think, oh, maybe that person really does have something going on. And the recency effect would just be pretty much whoever got the last word in.
Yeah.
In live debates, it really is more of a function of memory than it is anything else, where we have this problem with the way that our memories work in that we you know, a lot of things will happen, but what's available in our memory is usually the first thing that occurred or the last thing.
Yeah.
And so we sort of base what's true on what's available in memory.
Word. Yep. So here are some responses and solutions I found from empirical sources. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through each of these general responses and why they work or don't work or what they are. And then we'll apply those to each of the examples that we come across. So the first major example of a response is don't try to win. In McGee's post, he said, if you're thinking about trying to win, you probably won't. You won't in the sense that a narcissistic person is not going to accept any evidence you may have. Their defense mechanisms kick in, so they will reject whatever you say or whatever you have against them outright and just go on the attack. So it's not about winning. What it's about is showing that DARVO doesn't work on you anymore. And I think that's a really important one. You're not out to win. There is no win to be had. It's about showing that this doesn't work. I'm refusing to engage in this, and it's no longer going to affect me.
That's great. And I think that this kind of gets at it sort of a deeper issue too, which is that part of the reason you don't want to try and argue back or have a debate is because the motivation behind this kind of thing isn't to get at the truth. That's not what these folks are after. They're not trying to figure out what's really going on or to reflect on their own behavior. So trying to win with them certainly won't work because their motivation is not to figure out what's really true.
Yeah, absolutely not. It's just about their reputation. Also, try to find safety and support from people who care about you, people who will listen to you, advise you, validate you, and encourage you. Now, this could be in therapy, it could be from friends, family, support groups, even online forums. Utilize whatever support you can get. And also, be kind and compassionate towards yourself. There is no shame in having been on the wrong end of a narcissist. There is no shame in being lied to or lied about.
And that when you read that, it reminds me of the folks who reached out to you and told you of their experiences being wrong and being on the other side of this and having that kind of shame and that sort of thing. I think that's part of getting support too. If you've been a victim of this or whether you've actually done this, you can still find support and start to do some self-reflection. And
Yeah,
therapy is a good place to do it.
it is. And you can always you can always do better, right? There's a line in Trigun. It's my favorite anime of all time. And one of the major themes of Trigun is Dash the Stampede spends his whole life in guilt, all several hundred years that he's lived, and but his mentor, the woman who raised him, always said the ticket to the future is always open, and it is, and that's why he spends his whole life as a pacifist gunman, saving as many people as he can. It's a good theme.
Cool.
Then don't take it personal, right? Again, McGee talks about they will deny it. They will attack you. They will attack the evidence. They will claim you're bullying them. They are being victimized. You know the pattern which prepares you for what's to come. And when they are employing this tactic, they're going to try to make it about you, about your character, about your personality. Try to remember it isn't because they will do this with anyone. So try not to personalize it.
I'd say that's a good rule for almost everything.
Yeah.
I think I pretty much try to do that in all areas of my life. And the more you do it, the easier things get.
And stand your ground. Maintain your integrity. McGee says, let me put it to you this way. Pointing out their actions, the impact of their actions, setting a boundary, to them, this is the most cruel, selfish, unkind, evil thing anyone could ever do to a fellow human being. And if they honestly think that's being unreasonable, then be unreasonable. And I love that. Establish your boundaries and keep them. Don't budge on those. Because once you give an inch, you're going to lose a mile.
And they never stop. They will never stop. That's the other thing to keep in mind. You have to set those boundaries and be firm, because if you don't, the person, if they are a narcissist, they won't stop.
Yeah, and they'll hold it over your head for the rest of your life. And then I read a lot about restorative versus retributive solutions. And this is from a paper we got from Blackwell et al. And they talked about being willing to forgive and the other party takes responsibility. They said because the affordances of existing social media platforms exacerbate retributive harassment, and this was talking more in the context of like trolling people and stuff like that. One of the things that we should consider is alternative forms of justice seeking. This was really an important thing in the context of you see someone doing something bad and then you jump in and you dogpile them.
Mm.
And now you're the perpetrator. And that can be a problem. But it also matters the other way, right? If somebody is coming in and engaging in this kind of toxic behavior, you jumping on them with this retributive sense of justice is much less helpful. Restorative justice, they said, provides a voice to both victim and offender. The victim is encouraged to express a willingness to forgive, and the offender is encouraged to accept responsibility for their action, with the goal of mending the conflicts between individuals and communities. Now, I want to caveat this by saying, of course, there are offenses that will be so egregious that there is probably little restoration to be had. That being said, your focuses should be on supporting people who are victimized more than being harassing and retributive to the offender, because that offender is just going to spin everything their way or attempt to using this DARVO tactic. But also a willingness to restore kind of puts the ball in their court. And now they're the unreasonable one for not wanting to admit they're wrong and try to rebuild. And this can be really helpful in a personal relationship where maybe you don't want to cut somebody out of your life entirely if you don't have to, but you need them to take responsibility. Making sure they have a channel to do that can encourage them to kind of embrace their shame, right? Seek help, do better, and come back and admit their wrongdoing, and then try again. And when they learn to do better, they may be better, right? That doesn't mean that you budge and let them push on your boundaries. It just means you give them an avenue for reconciliation. You'll get more done that way.
When it comes to this, I'm kind of curious your perspective, somebody who is like facilitates communities and stuff like that. Like, what would restorative versus retributive solutions look like, say, in an online community from your perspective? Because to me, those are fascinating concepts, and I'm curious how they would apply in kind of your world.
Good question. So when we talk about like restorative versus retributive, so when you get, say, a toxic person in a game, you might give them a punishment for their toxic behavior. So somebody comes into a game lobby that I'm playing and they get frustrated at the game, they start throwing out racial slurs. So we might give them a timeout. You're banned for 24 hours, buddy. Don't come back. Okay? Go take a breather. You're going to be fine. You know, here's exactly what you did. Here's the community guideline. If you don't do this again, this is your channel for coming back and being able to participate in the game again. This is the behavior that has to end. If they're not willing to admit they're wrong, they'll take that 24-hour ban and they'll just go away. If they do take it in, then they'll take their 24-hour ban with some soul searching, take that time, cool off, come back to the game, and maybe they continue to do just fine. I don't have the data on this, but I'm pretty sure most people who engage in temporary toxic behavior and get a ban for some hours or a day or a couple of days, they'll come back, and they usually don't reoffend because they got busted. The boundary was set, it was enforced, and they know they can't test it anymore. Now, does that happen every time? No. And that's why you have sort of escalating offenses. If somebody comes into, they get a 24-hour ban, they come in, they're throwing racial slurs again, I give them a 48-hour ban. They come in, they're throwing slurs again, I give them a 72-hour ban. They come back, you're out of here, buddy. You're obviously not changing your mind. When you decide you want to come back, I don't know, man, make a whole fresh new account, like reinvent yourself, something, but I'm not dealing with that. So you kind of give avenues to return, and you can have like conversations with administrators. If somebody really wants to rejoin a community and be a part of things again, they can talk to admins and we can give them opportunities to return. Well, here's what I need to see from you. These people are owed apologies. These people are, these messages need to be deleted. Understand that if this person wants to kick you from a room, I'm going to give them mod controls to do that. And you're going to have a hard time of it because of what happened. But well, if you can show that you're here to be a part of things for a good period of time, then yes, I think that that's cool. And and we can work on things. So while I am not afraid to throw down the ban hammer by any means, because sometimes it is necessary, restorative solutions are usually things like give that person a timeout, make them go sit with themselves for a minute, give them an opportunity to come back and apologize, and then re-engage with them with limits. What are the boundaries we need to make sure are perfectly? And when they respect those boundaries for a long enough period of time, then you can kind of know, okay, this person is really trying again. This person is here. So that's like my, when I talk about restoration versus retribution, what I'm not doing is if somebody comes into a game or comes into my community, which thankfully I haven't really had in my community, be really toxic. When people come into a community, they are really toxic. You give them a chance to explain themselves, see if there's a misunderstanding first. If there's not, and they really are, being a troll or whatever, you make sure the boundaries are set up. If they cross the boundaries again, then you can start putting some punity. But otherwise, having some way to be able to contact mod, contact admin, and go, hey, I get it. This is what I did. Da da da. But they have to admit to the wrongdoing and take responsibility for it before you let them in. And it does a lot more for your community than being retributive. Why would I want to collect my community together and go harass some troll on their own webpage or their own post or their own communities? That doesn't make sense. And if they're in our chat and they're flaming or they're engaging in some sort of toxic controlling behavior, just sort of giving them the timeout is more effective than us trying to dogpile them back, because then we're all just kind of slinging crap back and forth. And it doesn't really help to me. It doesn't accomplish the goal of making the community safe, because now you're encouraging toxic behavior in your own community.
Yeah, you've kind of become the thing you tried to stop, right?
Yeah, just sort of an us versus them. And so just making sure, for me, it's making sure boundaries are well set, making sure there's an avenue for restoration, which involves taking responsibility and then showing that you're willing to respect the boundary, making some sort of reparations if you need to for something, formal apologies, or I don't know, returning or restoring things that need to be returned. And then at some point, like, our community just has to be willing to give the little bit of space, the little bit of grace to say, okay, we'll let you try again. But after, I don't know, second, third, maybe try, I probably wouldn't put up with it anymore.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think about some of these issues on like social media where, I have like a little Facebook community, and sometimes we do have to block people because they're just harassing everyone.
Yeah.
And sometimes figuring out like when is the right time to do that, or whether the person really crossed a serious line or not, sometimes that can be a little bit murky. And it's one of those things where I tend to give people a lot of passes before I'll do it. They have to be pretty egregious before I just block them entirely.
Yeah, agreed. And this paper here from Blackwell talked about different ways that they recommended this. So they're like, one of their suggestions, for example, was having a group for offenders, basically like a timeout group that you send them to. And you're like, okay, this is where you're going to be. And we can talk here away from everyone else until you figure this out. Right. I'm going to block you from all the other channels, or invite you to this group where we can talk about how to get your stuff back together. You can share your experience with other people who have gone through this. Like, we can air out our grievances, and then, we can try to go on. So yeah, like having a separate group for people who really want to air out grievances is fine. That way it's not taking place in the main chat. Those people aren't getting dogpiled and your discourse isn't as toxic. And then they also talked a lot about like timeout measures or temporary bans, temporary punishments and things like that, where like, we're going to make it a little bit worse for you every time that you offend, until eventually we'll hit a point where we won't anymore. But that usually deters the behavior, and it shows them like the boundary will get enforced.
Oh yeah, I'm a big believer in timeouts.
So the other thing that Blackwell talks about helping is bystander intervention. Again, here they were talking in the context of when somebody is like really trolling or engaging in really harassing behavior, and then they're sort of engaging in this denial tactic or whatever. So what helps with this kind of harassment more? Well, calling out unproductive behavior and harassment without engaging in it yourself. They said, promisingly, exposure to a bystander intervention among other conforming responses, decreases this perception, suggesting that designs encouraging bystander action could discourage harassment through normative enforcement. So what they're talking about here is basically like, if you see someone harassing or whatever, give people an avenue to report the harassment, and then have there be a note or something that's like, where somebody makes a comment and they go, hey, this isn't okay. Here's the guidelines violation that you're doing. Stuff like that. Like, here was the problem, and this is why you're getting put in timeout, so that everybody else who might want to join in with that toxic behavior, or might have been encouraged to do that, or might have been encouraged to engage in toxic behavior against it, sees that like, this has been handled, and here's a bunch of people showing support instead of aggression, which was really cool. So calling out the unproductive behavior is fine as long as you're not engaging in your own form of harassing, because then it's going to be you trying to DARVO your way out of that, and that's a problem, right? Support for the person being harassed was incredibly effective. They linked to HeartMob. When I went to that website, it redirected me to this righttobe.org. But they provided bystanders with really specific and private ways to take action, like sending support messages or documenting the abuse. You can do that if you have to, absolutely. They talked about how you should know that your rational response in the face of irrational responses matters. They talked about how participants in their study said they would look to other users' responses on a post to determine how they should act. And so that post was basically a post accusing someone of stealing. In the made up example, one of the commenters tells the woman who's accused of stealing to unalive herself. And it changed depending on what the responses are. People did legitimately change their outlook on whether that kind of comment was okay. It really depended. And so people really do look to other responses to see what the normative response is on this. How should I feel about this? Well, how does everyone else feel about this? And that makes sense to me. Humans are really social creatures. We look around to everyone else to see how to feel.
I think that is one of those effects that people vastly underestimate, how much they're modeling their own behavior and approach to a situation on how others around them are doing that. That is really powerful stuff, and most people aren't really tuned into it. We do most of it unconsciously, and if I think you're going to get to it a little bit, but there's more studies that show that, if there is trolling going on, it increases the likelihood that other people that join in on a thread will start trolling too.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they really don't normally do that kind of thing. There's some other factors like mood. But one of the other things I wanted to say too was that a bystander intervention also, it doesn't have to be public. A lot of times, I think just reaching out privately to somebody that has had one of these interactions, just sending them a supportive message can be a really big thing. And that can be a really big deal to them, to just give them that kind of reality check. Like, hey, I think you were treated really unfairly. I think it was wrong. I want you to know that I support you, and I believe in what you're doing, and I think you're right here. Things like that can really help people out. And I know that for a fact because I've sometimes been the person that's getting those messages. And it can be really very helpful, and it makes a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So your responses matter, right? And limits and priorities are really important. So in a paper by Chang et al. About the impacts of trolling and harassment and stuff like that online, they said limiting the rate at which users can post may discourage users from posting in the heat of the moment. If we also allow people to retract recently posted comments, then we may be able to minimize regret from hasty posting. And so putting limits on posting and the ability to retract posting not only keeps them from sort of in the moment spamming stuff out, which can keep them from wanting to engage reflexively in that kind of denial and attack right away, but also letting them take stuff back lets you like, oh, that was not a good thing to say. I'm going to rewind that. Like, hang on. Let me just delete this thread. Okay. Whoa. Sorry, guys. And that's one of those restorative things, right? Let them delete the thread. Let them take it back. and and dump it or whatever. Maybe keep it in a log on the admin side, but on the public face, let them take it down. Let them understand that they were wrong and drop it. They talked about altering the context of a discussion by prioritizing the constructive elements increases the perception of civility, which is good because then we're not engaging in denial and attacks and victim blaming and stuff so much. And even little things like pinning a post about the community's rules at the top of a discussion page helps. And they cited a recent experiment that was conducted on Reddit, and where when you go to Reddit, most pages will have a pinned post with their site rules and stuff for their community, or a couple of them. Usually one's for like rules and one's for like content restrictions and stuff like that, like what they'll allow to show. And these are really helpful because then when you join the page and you go to post, you have that right there. You're reminded of the rules.
That really works. So I had to do that on my Facebook page, and after we had some run-ins with folks that were really extreme and were posting like images of violence and stuff like this, and I had to block a bunch of people, and then I posted the rules for how the page works at the top. And ever since then, I can't believe it worked as well as it did, but ever since then, I've had very few people that I've had to have these messages with saying, "Hey, cut it out, stop that," and I haven't had to block anybody.
Nice.
So it's been a real game changer to just put those rules right at the top and just tell people, "Hey, if you're looking to get into flame wars, to insult people, to start spreading conspiracy theories or whatever it is that you're into, please go elsewhere."
Yeah, this is not the place for you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And when you do Twitch, they have you set up a mod message for anytime somebody joins the chat for the first time, so that every time somebody logs on your Twitch, unless they're like a subscriber or whatever, they'll see that mod message. And mine has those rules, right? These are things that we don't tolerate, and I make sure it's in my description at the bottom. Here's the things we don't engage in here, and I'm really clear that I don't play that paradox of tolerance crap. I am not tolerant to the intolerant in my community. We just don't. You're welcome to bring up the ideas if you want to discuss the ideas. That's fine, because I think education matters, and education is how you stamp out bad ideas. So that's fine, but but that's not, it's not going to fly. And on the other hand, when an idea is not particularly toxic, but it's just wrong, we'll let we'll let the people come in and engage in their conversation and engage the community. But I am gonna rebut the idea. Like on one of my last live streams, we talked about, like, if you come in and you're a flat earther, you can be there and be a flat earther. That's fine. The flat earth is not welcome. I'm gonna debunk that every time it gets brought up. But if you come in and you're, I don't know, white supremacist or something, then we're gonna have a problem. That idea and you have to go at the door. Don't leave that idea at the door. You have to stay at the door. That's it. I'm not doing it. I'm not putting up with that nonsense. It's not for me.
Yeah.
So set your limits. Make sure your boundaries are really clearly established, and then enforce them, and make sure they're posted and reminded everywhere. And then receipts. Okay, keep your receipts. McGee talks about keeping a diary, keeping screenshots, texts, emails, anything. Because if denial is their game, then having the receipts to bring back up, hey, here it is. This is what you said. At this day, at this time, quote, you said, da 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 da. Then having that to bring back up not only helps keep the facts straight, but it helps your sanity. It helps keep you grounded and keep things in perspective, right? That way you don't start doubting your own eyes and ears. You know what you heard, and you know what you saw, and here is the diary entry where you wrote it down right after you heard, right? This is what you said. I wrote it down so that I can't get it wrong. So you can deny this all you want, but this is what you said. Or, well, here's what was said during the debate. The debate's recorded. Let's go view it. Let's go back. Keep those receipts. It can help. And finally, the last point was disengage. If things are getting dicey and this person is in your face and they are holding things over you, toxic, and they are hurting your life, there's no reason for you to engage with them at all in any way.
I have to admit that this is the one that I automatically jump to now. I I rarely do all the rest of it. I really just go to disengage immediately.
Yeah. Well, and this is going to be the one you go to regard, we talked about how people who are more important to you may get away with more, right? May be able to employ more of, these sort of tactics on you. And so there are times though where people are not willing to disengage and they want other things they can do to leave those avenues open for restoration. But at the end of the day, if this person is wholly unwilling to change, yeah, who cares? Cut them. Drop the ban hammer on them from your server, from your game, from your community. Block them, cut them out. Right, block their phone number if you have to. If they're really egregious, I mean, block their phone number if you have to. Whatever you need to do. And at a certain point, if it really comes down to it, and there is no avenue of communication you can leave open to them that they do not abuse, then you just don't associate that with that person anymore. And that's kind of one of the hardest but most important things. And if for whatever reason you can't physically get away from or block that person in your life, my community members brought up gray rocking was their term, just being the gray rock. Don't engage in it. Don't show any emotion. Don't react. Don't nothing. You are stone that feels nothing until they get it out and you can get away.
This is such an important technique if you are dealing with somebody who is a narcissist or has those kinds of traits, because as long as you aren't engaging, if you are gray rocking, so if you are not engaging in the dispute, you're not getting heated, you're not getting emotional, then it's like it just cuts off all the fuel, cuts off all the oxygen to their process. They
Yeah.
just cannot continue with it and it stops.
Absolutely. And they're not getting anything out of it either. So if they are doing it for some sadistic reason, then they don't, it's not doing anything for them either. Okay, so let's talk about some more lighter examples of seeing this. DARVO and gaming. This is gaming with everyone. So I'm going to talk about times where people will deny, attack, and reverse in games. And one of the big ways we see this is cheaters. So this gets used a lot when people cheat. People can cheat at everything: card games, video games, Dungeons and Dragons. Oddly enough, I don't know why anyone cheats at Dungeons and Dragons role-playing games, but it's the stupidest thing to me, but whatever.
So just to pause for a second,
Yeah.
that's my jam, is the Dungeons and Dragons. A lot of this other stuff I'm sort of like learning as we go along, but if it's Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop role-playing game, I'm all in
Word.
on that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So like you'll get like, people will play Magic, and in Magic I get it, right? You're at a tournament, you're playing for big bucks, big money, prizes, tons of clout. So people will stack their decks, they'll for combos, they'll shuffle wrong, they'll mana weave. You'll get this stuff in the form of like people will bring loaded dice to D&D, or they'll chip or edge it to make it slightly heavier on one side, like why? Or they'll fake their rolls, like the guys who like throw the die down and then just pick it up real fast. 17, like why?
So just another, I'm interjecting here, and this is, I swear this is not shameless self-promotion, but in one of my children's books, the Beyond Belief book 2, The Adventure of Zombie Island, the hero of the book learns how to make loaded dice. And I include in the book a description of how you do it. So if you're the sort of person that's going to make loaded dice for Dungeons and Dragons, don't read my book.
Don't read,
that's what I'm saying.
Don't read your dad's book. It's too much. It's too good.
Yeah, there's too much really vital information in there about how to scam.
Word. Yeah, or they'll fake rolls and stuff. They'll, people will go to make their characters and they're like, oh, I just happened to get, 18, 16, 16, 14, 13, 12. How interesting is that I happen to get all these fantastically great stats? You'll get people who play video games and they'll use like cheat tools. If you're going to do that, like on your own, like a single player game, well, that's fine. I don't care, whatever, right? If you're playing on your own and you want to feel overpowered, okay, have fun. I hope it's very fun for you. When I talk about using cheat tools, I mean like using aimbots in a competitive shooter game. You're not winning off of your own skill then. You're just sort of racking up points to watch a number go up. At that point, play cookie clicker. Just click the cookie, watch the number rise. Or like speedrunners will do this again. They're out for clout, and so they'll splice their speedruns up. And truly, in a lot of cases, this is just for clout, like just to be famous. Online, people will splice up speedruns and stuff, or fake them in all kinds of ways, and they always get caught. Like again, this is a thing I don't understand. Like there are ways people have been caught speedrunning where like somebody looked at the audio waveform of the video and they're like, aha, there's a discrepancy in the background effect of your fan that's blowing in the background. Like they'll find every little thing. Like you are going to get caught. Why? And so what happens, right? They get busted and then they deny. Either they'll deny they did anything in the first place, or they'll argue that what they did isn't actually cheating. No, I didn't splice those speedruns. And then you catch them, you go, oh, well, here's the thing. Well, you don't know that that actually means it's spliced. It's like, here's unalienable proof. Well, it's not really cheating for me to do that. I mean, the gameplay is still all mine. I just spliced the runs together. It's like, okay, but that's its own category. You can't put that in in this. Or they'll use like tool assisted runs and be like, well, it's fine because it's still, the game being played. At least it's ridiculous.
I'm learning so much here. This is all like so new to me. This is really cool stuff.
there's really great videos on it. On speedruns are fantastic. Like they're like an art. The lengths that people will go to pick a game apart. Like one of my favorites is somebody beats Pokemon Blue in like, I think the speedrun for it is like 2 hours or whatever, because they glitch a Mew like right away. They give it Bubble Beam because it has the slowest animation frames, the lowest animation frames of every attack in the game. And then they just they use a couple of other glitches to get to the end. But there is a cheat you can do in Pokemon Blue where you can get a level 99 Mew in Cerulean City. It's like that fast. And it's so funny. It's super fun. But yeah, lots of cheating happens in speedruns. And they'll just deny it, or they'll say that what they did isn't cheating. In D&D, this will be like they're throwing the dice down and picking it up real fast, right? It's well, I'm not cheating. I'm just, you got to let your dice roll, man, so we can all see it. But you don't trust, when that's getting to the attack, right? But it's not cheating to roll my dice and then pick them up. Like, I guess, okay. Or we can't prove my dice are loaded, right? In Magic, we get this with mana weaving. People will you're supposed to fully randomize the deck, like 10 good, riffle shuffle. But you need these resource cards, these mana cards, to play the other spells, the monsters and the spells in your hand. And you don't want to get too few, but you don't want to get too many either. And so you kind of want to draw one every 2 or 3 cards. That's kind of ideal. So what people will do is they'll shuffle in ways where they'll like stack all their cards and then their mana so that so it goes like land, card, land, card, land, card, land. And that's mana weaving. There are shuffle techniques where you can do that. And then what you have to do is let the opponent just shuffle their deck a whole bunch to randomize it. And it's really hard. It takes a ton of riffles to undo good mana weaving, which is why it's a cheat. So we get denials of cheating. And then you'll say, so that person who mana weaves, there's their denial of cheating. They'll just say, well, I'm just shuffling my deck. Why are you nitpicking the way I shuffle my deck? It's like, well, because it's cheating. But, and then they'll attack. They go on the attack, right? So you might be playing a card game they call judge, they call mod for every little thing that you do, trying to get you kicked out. So once you start thinking that they're cheating, they'll start calling judge on you. Everything that you do. Right? Or in D&D, it'll be, you don't believe me? You don't trust me? How come you don't trust your own players, right? If you're analyzing, and slow playing is something that, again, happens in card games where you might be taking time to analyze all of the board, make sure no triggers are missed, stuff like that on your table. Make sure there's no effects of any of the cards that you are forgetting to do whenever something happens. And sometimes you'll do that and you're just trying to be diligent, and the other person will accuse you of slow playing, which is basically when you intentionally play slow to run out the clock so the match can go to tie instead of somebody being a winner. Or they'll do then what they'll do is they'll accuse you of slow playing and they'll rush you, right? I'm going to play my stuff real fast. Oh, come on, man, we got to go. Like, time's run out. And they put the pressure on you. They'll attack by calling you like a sore loser. You'll get this one in gaming a lot, right? Just because you're bad at the game doesn't mean I'm a cheater. Even though you can show, like, actually, here's you aimbotting. This cannot be done by a live human person. Stuff like that. So there's the attack, and then they'll reverse it, right? So then you start applying discipline to them. Hey, if you're not gonna let everybody see your dice rolls on the table, I don't know, man. I don't know if you can play the game with us, you know? I got kicked out of my toxic tabletop group, or yeah, you know, or they'll say something toxic in a D&D group, or they'll say something hateful or misogynist, or they'll role play a horrible, you know, a hateful character of some way that nobody at the table likes. They'll be like, bro, you can't play that character. And they'll be like, oh, my group is so toxic, I can't play what I want, right? Especially if they pay. And this is part of why I don't like, even though I play on live and stuff, I don't typically charge people to play my games because I never want to hear this. I never want to hear, well, I pay to be here, blah, 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 blah. And I'm not about that. I'm not about that life. That's dumb to me. So, but there's the deny, the attack, and the reverse. And at the end of these, by the way, if you have any interjection, just jump in.
Okay.
Jump in whenever.
Yeah, when
totally fine.
with a lot of this is I feel like, as I said, I'm kind of learning a little bit about the gaming world as we go through this. Yeah.
So you'll get this too. You'll get this with sore losers, and what will happen is someone will be a sore loser, and then they will say hateful things, just awful things about your masculinity and your mother and other members of your family. I don't know. Tell you to unalive yourself. All kinds of stuff. So they'll say hateful stuff, and the denial comes when they're losing. They'll either blame the opposing team, or they'll blame their teammates for the instead of reflecting on their gameplay decision. Usually, if a game is won or lost, you can zoom out and you can look at what we call macro decision making, which are like big major decisions that were made in the game that lead to the win or the loss. It almost never comes down to a microscopic moment of, oh, if you had just landed this one attack, the entire game, you know, butterfly effect would have been different, right? Usually it's major macro decisions that attribute to the win or loss. In card games, it'll be the way the decks are built. Some decks literally just hard counter other decks. There's nothing you can do. It's like rock, paper, scissors. In MOBAs, I played League of Legends for a long time. This will be things like, who on the team is helping out who? What was the champion composition? When did people go for major objectives in the middle of the map to get bonuses and buffs before they engaged in a 5-on-5 team fight, right? So League of Legends is like a 5-on-5 person game. You have 5 people versus 5 people, and each one controls one champion. You battle it out, and all the champions have special abilities that interact in different ways. It's really, really fun. But the community for that game is really, really toxic. And they will do this all the time. And what they'll do is they'll do things like, and in lots of other games too, you get this in Overwatch too. It's not as bad there, but what'll happen is you'll get these sore losers, and then what they'll do is, instead of reflecting on their own gameplay decisions, they'll pick out somebody with the lowest score, lower kills, whatever, or somebody with some trait that makes them different. So they'll be like, well, of course, you know, you're a woman and women can't game, so that's why we lost, because we let a woman play. You know, girl gamers don't really exist.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot. I think there's a lot of that goes on.
Yeah.
Women getting picked on, especially in gaming and just online in general. Yep. Well, in life in general, pretty much everywhere.
Everywhere.
In every context, all the time.
Yep. And then you'll get the attack. So I'm going to bring up the example again of League of Legends. So there's in League of Legends, you usually have somebody who focuses on attack, physical damage, and someone who focuses on magic damage. The person who focuses on magic damage, the map is broken into 3 lanes. There's a top lane, a bottom lane, and a middle lane. That is the shortest route to the enemy base. And the goal is to push into the enemy base and destroy their base, their nexus. So an ADC is an attack damage carry. That's a character who is going to not build a lot of defense. They're going to focus on just doing attack damage. And that's going to be their whole build, is I'm going to do as much damage as possible. And there's usually another character who helps them, called a support character, which will have shields or healing or some, not a lot of offensive abilities, a lot of defensive abilities, stuff that really helps that attack damage carry out. Things that like crowd control the other opposing team. So maybe they throw out some stuns, or they can push the enemy team away for a time, all kinds of stuff. And that relationship is toxic in almost like game after game after game after game. When you play with like random players, that relationship gets horribly toxic, because that ADC, the attack damage carry, will cry the whole game. I'm not supported enough. Well, you all you fed too hard to their support player, right? You to the support player will like dive in and get killed so the ADC doesn't get killed. It'll be like, you're feeding. Like, what? Feeding is when you let yourself get killed in a game to let the other team get points. It's a
Oh, wow.
trolling behavior. And so they'll accuse the person who is fighting with them of trolling so they don't have to think like, oh, maybe I went out too far. Maybe I overextended to get that minion kill. Maybe I should have been more on top of my map awareness, and that's why we got jumped by the enemy jungle player. And that's the other support, the other role that comes into play a lot with this is jungle players are players who go in between the lanes. There's a jungle full of monsters, and they'll weave between the lanes. And their job is to go through, kill some monsters, gain a level up, jump out on a lane, and try to 2v1 one of the champions in that lane. So there's a jungler on both teams, and junglers will do this all the time too. They will cry, "Well, you all pushed the lane too hard. If you wouldn't push the lane so hard, I could pick up some extra farm in your lane, or I would be able to jump this guy from behind instead of straight up." Instead of being like, "Oh, good, your lane is pushed. Let me focus on a different lane that isn't being pushed." Like,
Yeah.
they complain instead of looking at their own self. And then the reverse will happen in a lot of different ways, but one of the ones that my community brought up to me is one of my members was playing Overwatch, and he talked about how he was pretty new, and you have to play something like 50 or 100 games to be able to play ranked at all. So you have to be well versed in the game to be able to even start ranked. Or I think you need like 50 or 100 wins. Even it's not even just games; it's wins in normals. And he started in ranked, and he was still pretty new. And he gets like accused of the other team of it's not just we're not playing. They're not just denying that they're playing poorly. They're not just attacking him for playing poorly. Because of course he's new, but they're even reversing it. They're saying you are trolling us. You came in here to feed the enemy team. And you're following me from lobby to lobby. You're griefing us. Da 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 da. I mean, it was horrible. When instead you could just coach new players instead of attacking them,
Mm.
instead of denying your wrongdoing. Look at your own game plan and then coach other people that come in that are new. Hey, maybe build this item instead of this one. Hey, maybe attack this lane instead of that one. Right here are situations where it's better to do it together. Impart your game knowledge instead of hoarding it.
I feel like as we're going through, a lot of this is, yeah, there's this DARVO component, but also some of these are just like fundamental like social skills. Like how do you cope with loss? How do you deal with new people? How do you work together as a team? It sounds like a lot of these folks are just struggling with some of those basics sometimes.
Yeah. And then because they don't have them, then they engage in toxic behaviors like this, right?
Yeah,
Like Darvo and stuff. And they all, I mean, people handle this in lots of different ways. I don't want to try to imply that this is the majority of any gaming community for any game. But yeah, I agree. A lot of it is just like, I don't know how to cope with this, and so I'm gonna lash out and be hateful instead. Um
right.
no, I threw this in gaming, but it really applies to any fandom. But another way that you see this, I think, was in gatekeeping. And gatekeeping is a phenomenon where a group of people that are fans of a particular thing don't want anyone else to be fans of that thing for some reason. Typically because they don't want that thing to change ever. They want it to be exactly the same no matter what.
Yeah, that is something that I see sometimes with pinball. I'm kind of a pinball geek, and sometimes I'll go to these pinball conventions and stuff, and or different kinds of like pinball contests and stuff like that. And the communities there can actually be pretty insular, and they don't
Mhm.
really like new people or people who who are like stepping in and playing machines that they think are theirs or things like that.
Yeah, and it is ridiculous, right? Because at the end of the day, if your goal is for your fandom to do well and be fun, you should want it to be as fun and as accessible for the most number of people possible.
Hmm.
And being inclusive is a way that we do that. But for example, lots of gamers like to think of gaming as like a boys club activity, right? um or they bring other exclusive values to games, and they will reject inclusivity for no good reason. Like, it's art, bro. Like, just don't play it if you don't like it. I don't know what to tell you. But you'll hear this all the time. Well, my favorite fandom is being destroyed. And so you'll see this in the denial, right? So they'll deny not just themselves, but they'll deny things from you, right? Well, I'm not being hateful to this person. They must not even be a girl. Girls aren't good at video games anyway. No, nobody who's a girl gamer would play ranked like. Or I'm not a racist. I just don't understand why every game protagonist nowadays needs to be black, or woman, or a black woman, or whatever. Um, right now in the news, a whole bunch of people are really mad because Assassin's Creed has a black samurai who was a historical character as the main protagonist. Like, he was a real person who did in fact exist in history, and they are furious that Assassin's Creed would let you play a black person in a samurai game.
Wow.
As the protagonist, and I know neither of us are qualified to speak on that history. So I'm gonna leave it at that. But it blows my mind. In the game series where the first game had you play as a Muslim guy who kills crusaders, who assassinates crusaders because the Knights Templar are searching for an alien artifact that they can use to mind control people. I really want to make that clear. That you are reliving the experience of, and you even play as a guy who is reliving that memory, like your DNA with a machine. Like, this is a crazy sci-fi fiction story, and you're really gonna focus in on that? Okay, I guess. I don't know. But that's a type of denial, and it may be more mild. You know, I'm not saying like it's a huge thing, but it is a type of denial, right? Like, what? Like, at the end of the day, ask yourself why it matters in the first. I just don't get people that are like, I don't understand why every game protagonist nowadays can't just be a white dude with huge muscles. I don't understand that. It blows my mind. Anyway, and then they'll make this
Only
argument.
90, only 90% are, that it needs to be closer to 99%.
Yeah. Or I won't, as a white man, I won't feel represented enough. I don't know.
Yeah. This reminds me a lot of all of the brouhaha about when Disney was putting more characters of color into their movies. And what was it, Ariel
Yeah.
in Little Mermaid?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, all of these white guys were just losing their minds over it. And it was like, wow, this is like the most harmless thing.
Yeah.
This is the most harmless thing. And the fact that people are so sensitive about it really tells you a lot more about them than about Disney or
Right.
about the characters.
And
Yeah.
so then they'll make this argument of, well, it just doesn't fit into the theme or the story or the setting or whatever. Well, it's their story. Hey, bro, how about you go make your own? Okay? And do it the way you want it. All right? But yeah, I don't know what to tell you. And then they go on the attack, right? Gatekeepers will deny their blame. They'll just give excuses like these, right? I'm not racist, bud, or this just doesn't fit into the theme, story, or setting, or whatever. Or like Warhammer has a big to do about that, where they're I think they're introducing like women space marines instead of having all women be part of the Sisters of Battle. And somebody in my community was telling me that was a big to do, and I was like, who the fuck cares? They're literally genetically modified super soldiers in the 41st. Why does this matter? I don't understand. Do they make the aliens go kaboomy? Then I'm happy with that. That's all I care about, right? Like, I don't care. I want to watch Tyranids explode into paste. That's what I want. So like, I don't understand. It just blows my mind. But, and so in some cases, yeah, I get it. But in other cases, I just don't care. Or like, there's a D&D dungeon in one of the supplemental books, 5th edition, that has ramps instead of staircases, so that if somebody were playing a character that like had to use a medieval wheelchair or something, they could participate in the dungeon author was like, yeah, I thought it was really cool to use the idea of ramps instead of stairs for this. People lost their minds. Why would anybody in D&D ever be in a wheelchair? Like, it's just so stupid. So anyway, you get this denial of, well, it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. Well, it's the author's work. If they can make it fit, then they can decide that it fits. I don't know what to tell you. It's not yours. Write your own. And then they go on the attack. Well, the reason this is a problem is because the company or you who wants this inclusivity, you're ruining the integrity of my game. in my experience. And then they'll say things like, and when you ask them, like, what do you mean by that? Well, if Warhammer lets women be space marines, the whole company will go out of business. Because when you go woke, you go broke. And they'll use that stupid phrase of you go woke, you
Mm,
go broke, right? It's like, well, I mean, or maybe there are fluctuations in profits for gaming all the time, whether we are in recession or not in recession. I don't know what
right.
to tell you.
Yeah. All those broke Fortune 500 companies are really struggling.
Hasbro can't pay out its dividends this year, I
I
guess.
know. Yeah. Disney is just, they're really struggling.
It's just going down.
They
Yeah.
only have a few 100 million in cash. They just don't know where their next 100 million's coming from.
Like I just don't get it. And every time I see this, I always say, like, so did this company go out of business? Can you show me where, like, they put out a press release and said, we're selling all of our stocks, I guess, because we made the Little Mermaid a woman of color, so we're going out of business now. Like, no, they took a hit on a bad live action remake because it was a crappy live action remake. I don't know what to Anyway, I don't want to bog down in this, but it's so dumb. I can talk about this forever. And then the reverse comes with, now I'm the victim. I can't enjoy my simple game of D&D. All this gratuitous violence and assault is necessary for my role-playing story. And if you don't let me describe this graphic assault uh, of this voluptuous female imaginary character I made up in my mind, then the story won't go well. You players are ruining my experience. Or my fandom is dying because now you've let in all this minority, insert minority, and now it's going to go broke because you catered to wokeness. I don't know. And now my game is going to go away forever. Or my favorite, I play games to escape from reality, not be reminded of it. So why would you include like other kinds of people in the game? Like, I can't.
Wow.
Oh, it's so
Wow.
gatekeeping is the stupidest thing in existence to me. I just cannot. I don't know which is worse, gatekeeping or flat earthers. And the thing is, this applies to lots of things. So one of the examples you gave me was when we were
Mm,
putting together our notes was stand-up comedy. We get this a lot in stand-up comedy, and I agree.
yeah. Yeah. I was sharing with you that my wife is actually a stand-up comic. And being a female stand-up comic is a pretty rough situation. A lot of the stand-up comics are male, and a lot of them there's a lot of gatekeeping that goes on about like letting women do shows and stuff like that. She basically kind of had to invent her own scene, her own shows, create her own community just in order to sidestep that whole problem because it really is a big problem.
Yeah. So going back to our responses, don't try to win. Everyone's going to enjoy their game in their own way. That's fine. Don't try to convince people who are being toxic who will not be convinced. Just enjoy your game your way. You are not responsible for them. Game designers are not responsible for having to answer to people who say that they're, I don't know, too woke or whatever. They can design their best game, and that's great. That's awesome. The people who enjoy it will play it. The people who don't will not, and that's it. And we can all enjoy more games together. So there's no winning to be had. These people just want things to look a certain way, and they'll reject everything that doesn't look like what Nostalgia Goggles tells them it should look like. Find support, right? Have a play group of kind-hearted, like-minded people to play with. Shameless plug for our community here at Gaming with Everyone, where you can come play games the way you enjoy, and we are not toxic and do not troll and will not engage in Darvo and will appreciate you for enjoying games the way you want, as long as you're not a hateful, toxic person. So go you, yeah. Come hang out with us. Game with Everyone. Find the link to the Twitch in the description below, and like, comment, and subscribe, and find our Discord server from the Twitch page. Anyway, and then don't take it personally. Right? Games and fandoms and other arts are subjective things. And this is one of the reasons I say this is like the dumbest conversation in the world to have. Because these are not like objective facts. We are throwing these accusations around as if we have measured them and observed them and studied them through a microscope. It's art. Art is going to be subjective. You might have reasons for your opinions, but your opinion is yours. And you know what? That's okay. Even if your opinion is one that I would disagree with, you're entitled to it in a subjective medium. I think that that's fine. But I'm not going to take that personally, right? You play your game your way, and I'll play my game my way. And when my way happens to bring in more people than yours because I'm more accepting than you, we'll see who stands tall in the end. Anyway, and don't take it personal if people cheat either. Cheaters are going to cheat for their own sense of enjoyment. It has nothing to do with you. You are an innocent bystander in this sad, unhappy, random victim. Just call them when they're cheating, get them their punishments, and move on with your life. It's not about you. And stand your ground. If toxic behavior or cheating is happening, call it out. You're not a bad person for calling out people for cheating. You don't owe anyone a win, and you have a right to be part of the fandoms that you want to be a part of, provided you're not being toxic. When we talk about restorative versus retributive things, we want to decentivize cheating in ways that encourage fair play. So if someone is being a sore loser, don't dogpile them. Be kind to them. Sometimes they're just having a hard time. They might need a pick-me-up. Or if they're really just like going hard after you, don't feed into the fire. Like, joke at them. Make them a joke till they go away, right? And then either they'll laugh or they'll leave. But having that retributive, well, your mother also, that doesn't accomplish anything. It doesn't matter. If you're dealing with things like gatekeeping, explain how that actually does in fact cause the games and fandoms you love to die. And then you wish them well, enjoying their fandom the way they want. Enjoy yours your own way. Leave it alone. It doesn't matter. If you're a bystander to this, then call it out when you see it. If someone's being toxic to someone on your team or even the opposing team, call that out. If your teammates are being toxic to the opposing team, call your teammates out for doing that. Yo, hey, I know we're all on the same team here, but dog, you got to cut this out. Like, I'm not here to do this. I'm not here to make someone else's day bad. I'm here for us to have a good time. Call that out for them. If someone else won't make a diverse or game space or a fan space or a place where people can enjoy things without fear of attack or retribution, maybe consider making your own, like I did here at Gaming with Everyone, where you can come enjoy games in a great and fun way. Set your limits. Clear rules for what is and isn't allowed. Have clear social contracts. So you'll probably be really familiar with this one, Dr. Dad. When you go to play D&D, do we not have Rule 0? Do we not establish very clear social contracts for what is and is not allowed at the table before we start, right?
Everybody has to say that they agree.
Everyone at that table has to agree before the game can roll forward. When it comes to the social contract thing, some things can be decided with majority vote, but when it comes to the content that is and isn't allowed, then you have to decide if some people are walking away from the table or not. Because until everyone's on the same page, don't play. Period. You have to know what is and isn't okay before you proceed in. And the boundaries can be open for review. That's fine if you want to say, hey, I think this is too draconian or whatever. And then if people are pushing the boundaries, use blocks, mutes, timeouts, temporary bans, whatever you need, permanent bans if you have to enforce your boundaries. Make sure they're not crossed. And then keep those receipts. Keep those logs of toxic behavior. And finally, just disengage. At the end of the day, ban them. Ban toxic players from your events. Mute toxic players in chats. In almost every game, you can use tools that are available to you to mute specific players from the chat that are antagonizing you or something like that. If a game doesn't let you moderate that stuff, find a different game to play. Then that game probably deserves to be replaced with a game that does accommodate those features. Now, not every game necessarily can, for sure, but if they have no option for recourse and you are like feeling trauma playing a game, you should never do that. Find a different game to play. Don't be a part of a community that is toxic to you, because that toxicity is on them, not you. You never have to engage in toxic people. You never have to tolerate toxic people in your fandom. Just leave them out of it. It's fine. They can enjoy it their way and you can enjoy it with your way and disengage from them. You never have to tolerate toxic people in your discipline, no matter what it is, even if it's being a comedian. Any notes, Dr. Dad?
I was just going to say, I want to encourage people not to feel ashamed if they want to jump straight to disengage. I think it's totally fine. It's a totally good option. And for a lot of folks who are just, maybe they're a little bit burnt out, maybe they don't have the energy or the focus or the interest in really trying to engage with others that are being toxic, I think disengagement can be a great first step for them, first and last.
Totally. I couldn't put it in both places. I guess the screen would have got too cluttered. But yeah, definitely, like disengage. And even if you want to leave an avenue open for restoration, still, it's okay to disengage. Okay, so Darvo and trolling, then. This is another time online where we're going to see a lot of this. You're going to get this in social media. You're going to get this in comment sections. You're going to get this in forums and discords and stuff like that. And so a lot of this is we're going to talk about kind of what is trolling. First of all, there's a really great series of papers written by Dr. Jonathan Stay. Stay, right?
I believe so. It's
Okay.
either stay or stee.
Stee. Question. I don't know. I guess I should have asked him. Anyway, we'll go with Stee. We'll go with Stee. By Dr. Jonathan Stee. There's a really great series of papers by Dr. Jonathan Stee that, again, the links will be to, and you should definitely check them out, where he talks about trolling, and another really good paper that we're going to mention. But different aspects of trolling phenomenon have gone by many names. So you have like trolling, harassment, cyberbullying, flaming, shitposting, that sort of thing. While these terms are not exactly the same, they do have a really common theme. They all describe some sort of bad faith, unwelcoming behavior that occurs online to disrupt conversation, often by parachuting into a discussion invited. Now, who engages in trolling then? Well, pretty much anyone, really. He does talk about how there are certain personality traits, things like sadism, psychopathy, narcissism, and Machiavellianism. This dark tetrad has been found to be associated with trolling, and within that dark tetrad, sadism has been found to be one of the strongest predictors of trolling, which describes the tendency of someone to derive pleasure or enjoyment from being cruel or demeaning to others. Now, in another paper by Chang et al., they said many people believe that trolling is done solely by a small vocal minority of sociopathic individuals. Some studies have even showed that trolls have predisposing personal and biological traits, such as sadism or propensities to seek excessive stimulation. But in their research, they found people can be influenced to troll under the right circumstances. The target, for example, if the target of the harassment is being vilified, and this is in the Blackwell paper, they said, we find that people believe online harassment is more deserved and more justified, although not necessarily more appropriate, when a target has committed some offense.
I think one of the most interesting things that really comes out of that research that probably is underappreciated is that they found that, average people can be influenced to troll if they're just in a bad mood.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you just had a bad day and you're just feeling crappy, that actually puts you at a far greater risk to start trolling people and to start doing things online that normally you wouldn't do. So I think that just the role of like taking care of yourself and looking after your own mental health and not becoming somebody who's, grumpy and irritable and burnt out all the time, that's really important in just making sure that you're not trolling others when you're engaging in these online communities.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's point one of situational trolling, right? This
There we
can be
go.
caused by, Chang and Stay list a whole ton of these things. So I'm going to kind of go back and forth between both of their papers here, but they talk about mood. People put in negative moods are more likely to start trolling. The time of day. Trolling is most frequent late at night and least frequent early in the morning. And it also apparently peaks on Monday, because it's the beginning of the work week for many people. They're pissed off. They don't want to go to work, and they're irritable. And go ahead.
That's when your mood is the worst.
Hmm?
It's Monday, and you have to go back to work, and all the fun of the weekend's over, and you're feeling out of sorts, and that is exactly when your mood is going to be hitting some lows, and so it doesn't surprise me that that's when trolling happens.
Absolutely. People can be influenced to troll if they participate in other conversations that have trolling. So we suppose that a person participates in a discussion in which other people wrote troll comments. If that person goes on to participate in an unrelated discussion, they are more likely to troll in that discussion too. So if somebody's already been trolling or already been part of a conversation that had trolling in it, then they are likely to go on to continue to troll in other conversations as well.
This is really lined up well with in psychology what we call the consistency principle, which is that if your behavior is, if you engage in some kind of a behavior, then you will sort of begin to see yourself as the type of person who does this kind of behavior. Even
Mhm.
if it's kind of a one-off, you're just more likely to do it again, to be consistent with who you think you are and the kind of person that you are. So it doesn't surprise me that people that would start trolling or engage in a little bit of it in one community would just go to another and just continue that behavior.
Yeah.
It is right in line with what we know from social psychology.
And we're gonna talk about later this idea of the, I call it the I wish I was the monster you think I am. Uh, 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 I don't know, syndrome, paradox, situation, whatever you want to call it. I don't know what label you'd give it, but a lot of people react in that way where it's like that line from Game of Thrones, right? I wish I was the monster you think I am. And then they go on to then decide to be and then do the thing that they are being accused of anyway. And we're going to talk about that in a personal relationship too. But yeah, absolutely happens here. And not just in previous conversation with trolling, but also dogpiling. So dogpiling is that a discussion begins with a troll comment. It is, they found, twice as likely to be trolled by other participants later on compared with a discussion that does not start with a troll comment. In fact, the troll comments can add up, and the greater the number of trolling comments are in, the more likely it is that future participants will also put a trolling comment in the discussion.
People model their behavior on what they see other people doing. And that's why I think it's like the role of moderators and people in these communities is so important to
Yeah,
start stepping in and stopping this kind of thing right
absolutely.
away.
And that's what we talked about with, putting in your positive comments breaks that up, showing support breaks that up, and then, allowing these other comments to be removed, and then removing them, right, if you see people
Hmm.
engaging in it. But tribalism too. Dr. Steve says, when many members of a group are trolling a target, a sense of belonging can be achieved by conforming to the group's behavior. So same thing. It's encouraged by that dogpiling. He talks about the online disinhibition effect, that a person is more likely to troll from behind a screen than face to face because of a false sense of security and privacy. Being anonymous, it is easier to troll with the illusion of no accountability and no connection to one's life offline. So the more anonymous we are, the more likely to say something hateful we are. And finally, ideologies. Some people can rigidly over-identify with particular beliefs about things like health, gender, racism, politics, whatever, to the extent that they will engage in trolling behavior against other people who they feel threaten their personal beliefs. And we see this too with gatekeeping, right? My fandom is being ruined, so I'm going to troll this group, this minority of people that are ruining my fandom because they're bringing all these, woke ideas or whatever, and they're destroying everything that I love.
Yeah, that being anonymous piece is so important. I think a lot of people don't appreciate just how powerful that is as an effect. When, just think about like road rage, for example. People will say and do things in their cars when they're sort of inside these boxes that they're a little bit distant from other people. They've got a little bit of anonymity, a little bit of protection, and
Yeah.
they'll start to act in ways that are absolutely out of character for themselves. And there's a ton of research showing that the more anonymous a person feels that they are, the more aggressive and sometimes even sadistic their behavior can become. And it's
Yeah.
almost like they give themselves license to behave in ways that otherwise they wouldn't.
Yeah. And so where does this come back into DARVO? Well, we engage in trolling behavior, and then we get called out on our trolling behavior. So we engage in denial, attacking, and reversal in order to pull off the blame. And what's really dangerous here, I think, is because we have established that anyone can end up engaging in trolling, then anyone ends up engaging in this horrible, like narcissistic denial and attack behavior. So first of all, we deny the behavior, and in some cases they will just completely deny that their comment was hateful or whatever in any way, especially if it's an ideological thing, right? Well, I don't hate them, I love them, and I'm using my love for them to encourage me to call them out on their toxic whatever, when what you're calling them out on is like their orientation or gender identity or something that is innate to their person that they cannot change. I can't stand that. But they'll just deny they said anything hateful in the first place. And my favorite way that this happens, and this is a me term. I don't know that I've heard anybody say this before, so I'm excited to get to debut this. But I've said this for a long time. I call this Schrodinger's bigot, which is a reference to Schrodinger's cat.
Excellent term. I love this term.
I love this. So it's a reference to, for anybody who doesn't know, it's a reference to Schrodinger's cat, which is this kind of outrageous example that Schrodinger once proposed one time when he was discussing like quantum mechanics, and he proposed this idea of having a cat in a box filled with radiation. We can't tell if the cat is alive or dead, and so we assume that it is both until we can describe what it actually is, until we can look in the box and see. So we kind of just assume both at the same time. Schrodinger's bigot will do that. This is when somebody will say some horribly hateful stuff, and then they are either joking and or serious, depending on how the audience responds. And so they'll throw out this like this awful hateful stuff. If everybody gets really really mad, they're just joking, and whoever doesn't get mad, they know. It is a form of very overt dog whistling, where you say something that has an underpinning that everybody who gets it, you know. But it's one of the things that drives me nuts more than anything. Like, you cannot just come out and say hateful stuff and then just be like, I was just joking. I didn't say anything hateful.
Yeah. It really reminds me of, there was some sort of politician, I can't remember his name, but people would say, oh, no one's taking him. People are taking him seriously, but not literally, or literally, but not seriously, depending on what he's saying. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there is I love this term, because I think that there is a lot of people doing this, and a lot of people are just saying absolutely terrible things, and then just saying, well, I'm just joking around. Why are people so, so upset? Mad? Yeah, why is everyone so mad at me? I just, you can't joke about anything anymore. And then they just continue to say it's a joke while they're sort of pushing these terrible ideas. And I think there really is, I love this term, because I think that really captures it perfectly.
Yeah, and I left a comment on a post the other day where it was some kind of really like crude joke or whatever, and somebody got really mad at it, and one of the other commenters, not the poster, but somebody else came in and said, "Why are you so mad at this? Like, it's just a joke." And I said, because jokes normalize behavior. If you make something a joke long enough and often enough, then people see it that way. They see it as not something to be taken seriously. And then they don't when it happens, which is why there are like I am in a comedy setting for like someone who is a comedian. I am very much of the mindset that you can potentially joke about anything. You construct a joke well, it is exaggerated enough, and your audience is with you, and your audience understands. But you have to do a lot of legwork in that set to win that audience over, and then you have to make it very very clear the intention of the joke when you drop it. And sometimes jokes like that can be really, really funny. George Carlin is a great example of a comedian who has done very well at that, at making these kinds of crazy, crude jokes, like whole sets worth of them, especially in his later years, that are hilarious. I love George Carlin. Yeah. But we also understand where he's coming from. We understand that he is sort of intentionally almost taking this crazy kind of extreme view of things, and we're kind of along with him for the ride as he points out things that are, crazy off the wall stuff. And that's kind of the idea, is he's pointing out the extremes on every end of things. I get that. That's fine. That's not necessarily Schrodinger's bigot, right? But the attack comes, and you can tell someone's using this when they switch to the attack. You can't joke about anything anymore. That's not true. You can joke about pretty much anything in the right context, the right people, with the right setup. What you can't do is joke about some things in some situations with some people. And you did that, and that some people got mad. Of course they did. You said something dumb. What did you think was going to happen? Um,
Right.
and then people who are, what kills me about this is then people who are not professional comedians come and complain about this, that you can't joke about anything. We're like, bro, you don't have an entire living built around you being funny that you're trying to do. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, sometimes comedians have to test the waters. They have to say edgy stuff to see what sticks. Or they have to kind of throw jokes at the wall and see what's going to work, right?
Hmm.
I get that. I get that that's like a part of what they do. Um, and on the other hand, like there are plenty of who just play it safe and they do just fine. I don't know what to tell you. Okay, well, just play it safe and do just fine. But I get that. On the other hand, though, if you're just some random schmuck online, like okay, if you're just some person in a comment or in a forum and you say something hateful, you can't just turn around and be like, "Oh, I was just joking." Turn around and say, "Oh, sorry, I didn't know that would be such a hurtful thing to say in this comment. My bad.
Right.
I'll delete that comment. We'll move on." Just admit your fault.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing that is so like amazing about this too is that it's I've said stuff in my own life that's just ignorant.
Yeah,
I've said stuff that where I'm like, I say it and I literally did not understand how it would come off or how it would affect another person. And then somebody called me out on it. And I felt awful,
yeah,
awful, awful. But the thing there is that when you say you're sorry and you mean it, people forgive you like that.
yeah,
They will immediately forgive you because you know how rare it is to have somebody say, you know what, you're right, man, I was really ignorant there, and I'm sorry about that.
yeah,
That is like almost no one ever hears that. So if you do just come right out and say it, if you stop being Schrodinger's bigot and you become the cat, either dead or
yeah,
alive,
yeah.
right?
One
If
or the
you
other.
if
Oh
you
shit,
res
I did say something hateful. You're right.
yeah, if you resolve the quantum state and you just decide I was wrong and you apologize, it is amazing how much magic that works.
Yep.
You can really learn a lot yourself and people will forgive you.
Yeah. And then the reverse comes then when they attack everyone else. Well, you can't joke about anything anymore. And then they'll come around and they'll reverse it and they'll make themselves the victim. The whole community is dogpiling me for my small remark or whatever. Or they'll blame cancel culture, right? Cancel culture. Now, I don't necessarily agree with cancel culture, to be fair. Okay, I will put that out there. I think cancel culture goes way too far on stuff way too often. So I'm not big into it. But that doesn't mean that every time somebody has a problem with something you said, you can blame cancel culture. That's
Yeah.
not what that means.
Yeah. I think I've kind of come to the view that I think the danger of cancel culture is a little overblown and that
Mhm.
we have it's more consequence culture than it is cancel culture. And I actually wrote about this on my website, but the person who set me straight on this was actually my comedian wife, who I was talking to her about cancel culture. I was like, this is terrible stuff. And she was like, wait a second, let's think about what really happens to people when they get canceled. And she kind of went through all of the big names in comedy that had supposedly been canceled. And they're all like making millions and they're on global tours and they have hit books and all these sort of things. I was like, maybe this isn't really what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and there are, and that's there, and that's why I say like there are definitely times where I think the idea of the culture, this idea of oh yes, now we get to cancel the next person and dogpile on them, and let's get them
Yeah.
fired and let's dox them and let's da 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 da. Like that is legitimately dangerous, and that's what I disagree with. In many cases, holding people responsible for what they did, that's not cancel culture. that's
Hmm.
that's 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 fine. I think that that's totally okay. And so I agree. And so just because something has gone too far a few times, like holding people accountable, or a massive amount of people on the internet holding people accountable, does not mean that you get to point to that every time you say something hateful and then say, "Well, I'm just getting canceled." Everybody gets canceled nowadays. Da 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 da. Because it's not just oh yeah, you know what, that was a really dumb thing that I said. I was trolling. You're right. Or they'll throw out some nebulous, meaningless term that has a when I say nebulous and meaningless, what I mean specifically here is that the meaning of the word will change depending on what group they want to attack with it at that time. So things like woke. Woke had a meaning and has, in some circles, has a meaning that is impactful and meaningful, and I get it. When it is weaponized and applied by other groups, especially super conservative groups today, they don't mean it that way. They give it a
Yeah.
nebulous, meaningless way. It's just everything I disagree with, and so they'll throw this term out and go, "Oh, you know what? I can't. You can't say anything anymore because everybody is too woke. Everybody wasn't woke, and I wouldn't. I can't fit in with this woke culture. I'm standing up for myself. I'm the one who's standing against the face of the masses who are denying reality or whatever it is they want to say. It's dumb.
Yeah. Yeah. Woke is just like a word you apply when you just want to say something is bad and
Yeah,
you don't like it.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, I have family from Alaska, and right now they have a governor's race going on up there. And the two candidates were arguing, and the conservative candidate in a debate called the other candidate woke. And so the moderator said, "Well, what does that mean?" And he probably spent about 10 minutes not giving a definition
Of course.
because he couldn't. There's just no definition. I think he said it at one point, he said it was when men wear tutus. And then at another point, he said it had to do something with like, you know, being, just out of touch. And touched, he had so many, it's like, you're out of touch with the common people. And it got to the point where eventually the moderator just had to stop and say, okay, we have to move on because I don't know what this means.
Yeah. Yeah, because it is, because the definition is everything I disagree with. But nobody wants to say that because of course you would sound insane if you said that. That would be a
Right.
really dumb thing to
Right.
say. So
Yeah. Okay.
so back to our responses, right? So what do we do when people are trolling and then we call them on trolling and they engage in DARVO? Again, don't try to win. There is arguing. Either they're sadistic and all they want is your reaction. There is no own to be had. There is no win to be had. You're not going to own them back. It's not going to be like, oh, yeah, you got him, like whatever. Because that other person won't react to whatever you do. It's meaningless to them. All they want is for you to react. So don't try. It's not worth it. Go seek support. You can report them to community moderators. You can vent about them with your friends. Pull back to your own community. Pull back out of that public forum if you need to your own space with people who care about you. Focus on them first. Get your situations, get your story straight, get grounded, and then go re-engage if you need to, or whatever. But otherwise, I wouldn't. Stand your ground, right? If you hold a position with a good reason, then no amount of trolling should end up changing your mind. Evidence should change your mind. You don't ever need to accept someone's Schrodinger's bigot gambit either. You don't need to. You can just say, well, I don't care what you meant. This is what you said, and it was offensive. Just because they say they were joking doesn't mean they weren't offensive. I was joking is not a get out of jail free card for everything that you say. You can apologize. You can be joking and still be offensive. And you can say, you're right. I was trying to make a joke and it was a bad joke and it didn't land. I don't know how to make that one funny. I'm going to cut that out of my repertoire. It's cool, guys. No problem. I get it. Sorry for that. No problem. We can try to be restorative versus retributive, though, because remember, anybody can be a troll. Most troll comments are people just having a bad day. Trolling back, being retributive, feeds to the fire. Don't feed the trolls. We all know that. We all hear that every day. Don't feed the trolls, but we do it anyway. But taking a restorative approach shows that trolling doesn't work on you. You can remind them that you are above that conversation. This conversation is below me. I am willing to re-engage. You get your act together. We can maybe try this again. Right now, this conversation is below me. I'm too good for this. If they make an offensive joke, for example, call them on it. Hey, buddy, that's not really cool here. We don't talk like that. Oh, shoot. I was just joking. Okay. You want to go ahead and throw out an apology to the people you probably offended with that? Yeah, guys, I'm sorry. Good. Do better. And then they can do better. Bring them back in. Ideally, that's what you do, right? That person's having a bad day. You talk them through that hard time they're having, and then they come back and they can rejoin the community or the public forum, wherever it is. Bystander interventions help. If you see trolling, support the person that's being harassed, report the person engaging in toxic behavior. Have limits and priorities, right? A lot of times trolls are going to red herring you off to all different kinds of stuff because they can't actually discuss the thing they're trolling you about. That's not in their wheelhouse anyway. They were just throwing some stuff out on a whim to see what happens. So keep the conversation focused on that. If they try to go off into the weeds, remind them of things like community guidelines, report them, maintain and enforce your boundaries. Keep your receipts. If you really need to and the harassment's bad enough, just screenshot everything before they can delete it. Make sure you keep a record of that. You don't have to keep it to throw it back in their face, but if it comes up to moderators, then you have it. And then disengage, right? Nothing wrong with hitting block on someone. If they're unwilling to engage, can't change their mind, there's no reason to engage with them. Doesn't matter.
Or
There's no shame in disengaging.
Yeah, and I think that the thing to keep in mind is that when we talk about feeding the trolls, what we're really talking about is just giving them attention. So disengagement doesn't have to be full-on blocking. It could just be like moving on, ignoring them, just paying attention to something else entirely.
Just go on. There's no point. And when they don't get that, when they don't get that back, that reinforcement. This was in Jonathan Stee's paper too, and I don't have a citation for it here, but it's in there. Believe me, bro. But there, when he talks about when they don't get that, when you give them something back, you feed in and you reinforce the behavior, and when you don't, you stop reinforcing it, and they're less likely to try and. So that is absolutely supported by the evidence there. This is a brief aside, but I wanted to bring up that we see this in conversations, but also in debate a lot too. You can see this come up in debates, and it's kind of a tricky thing. So this is going to be something that occurs when I'm going to move us over here now. This video is going to have us on every corner because I did not make a designated space on this PowerPoint. But what are you going to do? So if somebody makes like a horribly wrong point or argument, or they are having to defend a position that is just demonstrably wrong, or they are attacking a position that is demonstrably correct. So again, flat earthers, you're going to see this a lot with them. It's going to happen. And anybody who does this. Some really good examples, though. This is not a comprehensive list, but Dr. Stee has another paper he wrote on Medium where he gives examples of what's called sea lying, which is like a super advanced kind of trolling in debate. And he gives a whole bunch of these. So in these debates, you'll get denials, right? I'm either defending a position that is indefensible, or I'm attacking a position that is unassailable, or I have done or made something horribly wrong. And instead of admitting when they're wrong and admitting when they don't know something, which is what actual critical thinkers do, we change our minds with new evidence. We admit when we don't know things. That's fine. And we are skeptical of evidence until we can verify it. That's also fine. I'm not saying you have to accept everything, change your mind constantly. Be skeptical of evidence until you can verify it. That's fine. But instead of saying, I don't know that, or, I'm unfamiliar with that, or that's not in my wheelhouse somewhere, they'll make this demonstrably wrong position and then double down. And this is where the DARVO comes in. We have the denials. So they'll do things like play Dr. Google. I'm not actually wrong. Look, I Googled and I found that InfoWars agrees with me. They'll bring up some other ridiculous citation that's unaccredited.
This feels like so much of my life right now is just dealing with folks that do this.
Yeah. This I just posted on Facebook today. Like this week alone, have I had oh gosh, it must be like 10 or 12 flat earthers on pages that I commented on, asking them for a model of the flat earth that shows the stars rotate around both poles. I've had maybe 12 people tell me that the South Pole just doesn't exist.
Wow.
There is no South Pole.
Okay.
All compasses point north. But where does the other needle on the compass point? There's two. What's the other one? This is bad.
The ice wall. Funny. It's the ice wall. Don't you understand? It's magnetic all the way around.
That's right. Even though, yeah, so dumb. Or you'll get the middle ground people. He brings up the example of middle ground. Hey, I'm not here to, shut down yours. I'm just trying to find the middle ground. There's good people on both sides. There's good information on both sides. And Steve cites this example of somebody who said, if we were having a debate about whether the Earth rotates to the east or the west, there would assuredly be some people in the middle who said that it doesn't rotate at all. And that's how ridiculous that sounds, because there are some things where there isn't a middle ground on
it. Yeah, yeah. And, maybe it depends on where you are. Maybe it's rotating only at the horizon, but not at where you're at, Like, I can imagine people trying to twist themselves into pretzels to try and make something like that work.
Yeah. Try and make everyone correct. It's like the 6 or 9 thing, right? Growing up, I used to hear that one a ton
Right.
from my own family. Is like, well, is it a 6 or a 9? It's a matter of perspective. And it's like, well, no, somebody drew that with intentionality to be one or the other or both. The goal should be to figure out which one it is.
But what about my truth? It's my truth that it's a 6, okay? Whether the person wrote it as a 9 or not.
I used this one on a student. So I had a student who said something like that. We were doing David Hudson's Think Keynes. And we got to a part in there where he asks, where he quotes a scientist who says, Paul Samuelson, who says, when the information changes, I change my mind. What do you do? And the student was like, I don't know. On some things I would, but on some things, I might not. And I was like, that's really interesting. So I thought to one of Magna Bosco's street epistemologies, shows
Great
this woman.
Stuff.
They're brilliant. And he shows this woman a Tic Tac box, and he says, there has to either be an even or an odd number of mints in this box. And so I told this young girl I was talking to, I used a jar, and I said, let's say I have a jar full of beads, but we don't know how many beads are in the jar, but we know we can boil it down that there must either be an odd or an even number, either 100 or something like that. And I don't know which it is. How many beads would you say are in the jar? She's like, I don't know, odd? And I was like, well, you don't know, or is it odd? Like, what is the correct thing to say? Would you say that it's odd or even? She was like, I don't know, even? I don't know. I was like, I don't know, exactly. Don't let me present you a false binary. Say, I don't know, right? And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
I don't know is a perfectly legit answer.
Yeah.
Even is a good answer, odd's a good answer, and I don't know is a great answer.
Yeah. Now, if I said, so kiddo, if I told you that I believe there's an even, and I have no way to verify that, we have not counted the number of beads, but it's my truth, would you accept that from me, that there's an even number of jars because it's just my truth? And she was like, well, no, because you don't know. You didn't count them. And I was like, right. Now, what if I said there's an even number of beads in the jar, and then you count them and find there's an odd number of beads in the jar? But I won't change my mind because it's my truth. Would you agree with me or disagree? And she was like, no, you're just wrong. And I was like, exactly. And that's why when you say it's my truth, you're incorrect. My truth can be Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is a good anime. That can be your truth. That's fine. Whether the earth is round or not is not your truth. It's an objective, measurable fact.
Right.
So
that's a great example of that. I love that. And I think the idea of saying I don't know is a wonderful thing to teach kids. It's something you should be proud of, to say I don't know.
It beats out my truth every time. Every time for me. Like, okay, you can think whatever you want if we don't know, but like, we don't know. What we know is that we don't know. Just go with that. It's okay. It's okay to not know things. Spot. Yeah.
It's so good. It's good to know, but only if you really do.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't know, it's great to be completely transparent with yourself and everyone else that I just don't know, which means I can start this adventure.
100% and learn. And then, and then finally they'll deny by he gives the example of the armchair critic, which is when someone regards their own personal experience or their own personal interpretation of the evidence as just as valid as actual expert studies or interpretations of the evidence. So I'm not wrong. I read the paper and the paper said this, and that's what I got out of it. And your interpretation of the paper is just wrong. And I'm like, but my interpretation of the paper is the one that's agreed by all of the people who are experts who do the stuff. And they just
Yeah.
go, well, read it again.
I it wasn't recent, but it was not that long ago. It was maybe about a year ago or so. I actually had somebody try to correct me online, not about a scientific paper that I had written, but about the topic was belonging, which was my dissertation topic. And I had studied all this research and I had written and I had published on this, and they were trying to correct me on this and lecture me. And it was just like, that is, I mean, this is the perfect, you're describing this person perfectly. And the internet is full of these folks.
Yeah, armchair critics are everywhere.
Yeah.
And then they'll give attacks. So in debate, you'll get these denials, you'll get attacks. So things like flipping, they'll just take the exact accusation you gave to them and flip it back. So if you say, well, that view is unscientific, they'll say, well, actually, your view is unscientific, the one held by all the scientists, because it didn't follow the scientific method, which is agreed upon
Yeah.
by all the scientists. And I'm not making that up. It's a real thing that flat earthers say on a nearly constant basis. And other science deniers, they'll be like, well, that's not scientific. The scientific method says this. It's like, obviously you don't know. Like, you can't, because you're
Yeah.
incredulous enough. You are credulous enough to believe that the earth is round. So, like, I don't understand how you think that your interpretation of the way that science works is anywhere like that. You're just nitpicking. Because if you actually cared about the method, you wouldn't have come to the conclusion you came to. Like, that's the thing about science, is science is a way of thinking. And if you follow the way of thinking, you end at the right conclusion. And anyone does. We don't have to believe in any one thing. We just believe in what's true. That's it.
Yeah. And also, I think this people do something similar where they'll say that, well, you know, the scientific method means that you have to question everything. So then what they end up doing is they end up constantly questioning the conclusions of science they don't like.
Yeah.
And just in saying, oh, that can't be wrong. I'm skeptical of that. But really what it is it's scientific denial, where they're just denying what the consensus is and what the experts are actually saying.
Yeah.
And then calling themselves scientific because they're questioning the science.
Well, it's like that post. There's like a meme or whatever of it that's like, trust the science is the most unscientific thing that you could ever say, because the whole point of science is to question science. It's like, yes, we ask the questions, but we also accept the evidence that gives us the answers to the questions.
Right.
Like the problem is you stopped at asking questions and you didn't find any answers because you don't want the answers. So. And then, this was one of my favorite quotes from Stay's whole paper that he wrote. He said, blind Socratic questioning involves first equipping yourself with an entitled aura, and then proceeding to pointlessly nitpick every nook and cranny of your target's comments until neither you nor they understand what the hell is being discussed. A maddening process.
Maddening. That is one where you're just, at the end of it, you're like, I don't know what happened. Why am I so worked up? And yeah, when you get to that point, it's probably best to go straight to that response that is in the list, which is disengage.
Right.
Just disengage. It's not worth it.
So somebody turns to you and they go, but what is a chair? And you're like, this conversation is going nowhere. Anyway, there are, to be fair, there are absolutely some arguments where what is a chair is valid. Okay, I'm just saying, like, that's like an example of blind Socratic questioning. It's like the what is a chair argument. Not using it. And then they'll do the reverse, right? The whataboutism. Person A will say pseudoscientific therapies can be harmful. Person B will say, well, what about big pharma? We're all victims of big pharma, right? I'm the victim here because big pharma is poisoning me. And you should feel like the victim too. Big pharma is poisoning us. Or they'll use like the trope of use, like the Galileo Gambit fallacy, Galileo was persecuted too, so I'm a victim. I'm being persecuted for my beliefs. And just like how Galileo was persecuted for his, everyone will know that I'm right in the end.
Yeah. Yeah. If people disagree with you, then obviously you're Galileo.
Right.
That's the
Must
takeaway. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. There's no flaws in that reasoning. You nailed it. You nailed it.
Especially if you disagree with the consensus. If you disagree with the consensus of most of the experts, you're
You're
Galileo.
definitely Galileo when
Yeah.
and it's such man. There's a great definitely check out uh Melanie's Thinking is Power article on fallacies, because she has the Galileo Gambit in there, and it's phenomenal, her description of it. But like what people forget about that one is like Galileo was not oppressed when he talks about his famous quote about authority. He's not oppressed by the scientists of his day. They disagree. The consensus at the time disagrees, but he's also like building off of the works of other scientists. Other scientists are going to build off of his works and verify it over time. The people who were coming down on him and saying like, hey, this is a problem, was the theocracy. The Catholic Church didn't like
Sure.
the idea that the earth wasn't the center of the universe.
Yes.
So
Yes.
like when you claim the Galileo Gambit, what like you're confusing the scientific authority with a dogmatic one. You're treating dogmatic authority and scientific consensus as if they are the same thing, and neither. It could not be further from the truth.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing how long it took the Catholic Church to get around to apologizing to Galileo.
Yeah, 92. 92, they finally declared him not a heretic. Wow.
Just to be clear, that's 1992.
Yes. Yeah. Not 1892.
1992,
1992. Let me
not
guess.
1792.
Yeah. 1992.
1992.
So it's something like what,
So
200 to 300 years later?
th-
Like
they needed to sit on it for a while. Yeah,
again.
they had to do some real deep thinking. Meanwhile, we're putting satellites in orbit. It's yeah, it just shows you the difference between the scientific consensus versus the faith or theocracy, that type of consensus. Very different animals.
Absolutely. Well, because, dogma is not about finding the truth. It's about what's deciding what's true and then affirming it. There's a Dan McClellan, Dr. McClellan has this quote that I love where he rags on apologetics, and he says apologetics the purpose of apologetics is, or it's something to the effect of, the purpose of apologetics is not to find the truth. It is to affirm to those who already believe that they are right to believe. And it's just antithetical to good scientific thinking. It's ridiculous.
Hmm.
Okay, so fun time's over. Trigger warning, everyone. Okay, one more time.
This is the part where I, as a psychologist, earn my keep here.
Yeah, this is it. So we had a lot of fun, Dr. Dad, talking about video games and trolling and Dungeons and Dragons, and now
I learned a lot about stuff. Yeah.
did. And woo, it was fun. But now I wanna I wanna really come in and talk about how this happens in your personal life, because having lighter examples of these techniques helps us apply and understand them in context when we get them in more serious situations. And again, what I'm going to give is a series of examples, and these are examples that for you all in the audience, these are examples that Dr. Dad and I have discussed. These are examples, personal examples that I pulled from my community. All the members will remain anonymous, so we're not going to say who said what necessarily, because I don't want to reveal anyone's trauma or anything. They were kind enough to share with me, so you will have to take it just a little bit on faith that I am not making these examples up, but I promise I'm not. I'm not that good of a writer anyway. These are going to be examples of how in friendships and in your family and in relationships, people who are toxic will employ this kind of DARVO techniques or these kind of denial techniques to harm you. And that's a problem, or deny harm from themselves. And so one of the first ways that this comes up is in unrealistic expectations. People in your family, people who are your friends, have befriended, acquaintances, whatever, people who join communities that you're in, they will come in with unrealistic expectations. And the example I'm going to give is in one of the Discord communities uh, that we're in one of the communities that I'm a part of. There, before I was there, long before, there was this person who joined this kind of at that time it was a smaller growing community, and they were really kind of hungry for power over people. And so they were super active at first, really pushing to become a moderator and really just get a ton of clout really fast, because these are like Twitch, like networking, social media, so, build up social following kind of communities. The thing is that most of the people that are in communities are also networking and streamers and stuff like that. And so it's not like you join and you get a whole bunch of like following. The people you get in your following are other people doing what you do. And it's a place for us to support each other while we all grind out at being content creators, trying to support each other and give each other ideas, help each other set stuff up. I have for example, just later today, Twitch Studio got discontinued. I have a bunch of people offering to help me set up OBS and get things set up for my live streams to be able to go back online. Fantastic. I can't thank them enough. So this person joins in. Well, his goals were not met that he wanted. He didn't get the clout that he thought he would get. He figured if I join this community of X size, I should get Y viewers. I should make affiliate within this time. I should make partner within this time, etc., etc. And then, when he attacked when he complained about it to the server, the moderators and stuff in the server were very clear, like, that's not what we do. We don't create false engagement. You have to get engagement on your own merits. We're here to help show you how, but you have to put in the time and the work and stream and make the videos and stuff. You have to do the stuff. And he said, well, he came in with a denial. I don't have an unreal expectation. I joined a community that is this size. You should be able to promise me this much viewership. I should have, this many people in my live streams at all times, or whenever I go live. It should be easy to make partners. There's 300 people in this community. How come we don't all have 300? Like, dog, because we don't all just go around watching each other and raid trading into each other's stuff. Like, that's toxic and gets false engagement. We don't engage in that. Like, we all stream when we have time, and we all watch each other when we have time. And it works well for us. And we enjoy the community. And then he goes on the attack. Well, the reason my goals weren't met is because you didn't support me enough. You didn't post my links or my events enough. You didn't blow me up in the chat enough. It's your fault. In fact, then he makes himself the victim. Then when he leaves, he goes on to continue playing in his live stream. Now you're benefiting from my involvement because now you can get all this clout by making me a villain. You're making this a story you can tell to make yourself sound better. That sort of thing. Any comments on that?
Yeah, I guess but people, it sounds, one of the things that's interesting about that to me is it is unrealistic expectations, but also it sounds to me like this was a person who wanted to join a community in order to just kind of use the community. It wasn't really about being a part of something or being like like contributing and being a productive member. I don't know a lot about these communities, but it sounded like this was a person who just came in and they had a very sort of like transactional view of their participation, which is kind of sad when you think about like the point of a lot of these types of online communities is to foster belonging and to have some connection and a place where people feel safe and heard and they can like start to really connect with like-minded people. Yeah. And this person was really not interested in that at all.
Yeah, and that's the narcissism at play, right? I'm going to pretend to be involved in this community, and then but I'm really just here for me. And then when I don't get what I want, I'm going to throw a tantrum and then say that tantrum is your
yeah,
essentially.
It's just this chronic modern epidemic of like trying to like monetize all your interactions. And anyway, that could be like a whole other like podcast, but yeah, I just see like a mindset here that is very troubling, and I see it a lot, which is that I don't do anything unless it's transactional. Yeah, and that's pretty toxic.
Absolutely. Now this is a small example from like a community, but anybody can have unrealistic expectations of you. right? Your family and friends can have unrealistic expectations of you, and they can think that you need to meet all these super lofty high goals. You don't. Set your boundaries. This is how I'm willing to engage. This is what I have on offer. Go for that. That's fine. You don't need to be Superman or Superwoman to every single person in your life to be worthy of being loved by people. You are already worthy of being loved. Let the people love you. That's fine. What is that Dr. Seuss quote? Those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind. Sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
ambivalent attachments, which is a term you taught me. I didn't know this term, so thank you for this.
Okay.
Ambivalent attachments is when, for example, in this case, somebody expressed hesitance to a relationship. So it's when somebody is going to have wants to kind of maintain an attachment or an avenue for an attachment, but at a distance. So this person is going to be hesitant for a relationship with this guy. She's going to say, "I'm not ready right now because I feel damaged. I feel like I need therapy. I need to get my life together first, etc., etc." And the guy agreed. Yeah, let's just be friends for now. That's fine. And then all of a sudden, that became the relationship's over, and you ended it, right? Um,
Hmm.
so the denial came from, well, hang on. I wasn't saying I don't want any relationship. I'm saying that I wasn't ready then. I need to get all of these things together. And then the attack. You should have waited for me. You hated me. You were looking for a chance to dump me when you should have set your life aside for me to be ready. And then the reverse. Now I'm alone and I'm miserable. And now you're gallivanting around. And in this case, this was especially harmful because here's where we get that I wish I was the monster you think I am approach. People can go on to actually engage in unhealthy behavior. And in this case, the guy went on and engaged in an unhealthy relationship because he was like, well, I guess I am just some piece of shit. So let me go, so I'm gonna lower my inhibitions and engage in a relationship I shouldn't be. And had the hesitant person made their approach clear instead of being ambivalent, and their intentions were very clear, it may be that no harm was done. Everything could have been um, uh, talked about. And so, in this case, for me, clear communication is really the key. What are your thoughts?
I guess to kind of put ambivalent attachment into perspective,
Yeah.
the way that there's something called attachment theory in psychology, where we talk about people having secure attachment, I think of insecure attachment, and there's ambivalent attachment, which is where a person, and there's also avoidant attachment styles, but an ambivalent attachment is where you are seeking an attachment to somebody, and your style is that you want an attachment to somebody while simultaneously feeling very uncomfortable about it and not wanting it. And it has this huge impact on relationships, friendships, the way you raise your children, a whole lot of things. It can really kind of impact you across the board. And when I first ran across what you were putting here, it made me think about the ambivalent attachment style as a pretty good explanation for this. And again, it kind of highlights how DARVO and this approach that people are taking is something that really serves more of a psychological need of that person
Mm,
than than actually getting at the truth of something, right? So if somebody's
yeah.
arguing with you about something, sometimes they might be arguing with you because they have a reasonable disagreement or something along those lines. They just see things differently, or they think that you're not being fair. But in this case, it really is about the fact that this person's probably their attachment style is such that they just, the moment that they get some kind of commitment, they're not comfortable with that. And then the moment that they don't have it, they're not comfortable with that either.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. There's another example of this, which is like the I didn't mean to steal your girl, bruh kind of guy, right? The person who pursues a romantic relationship they're not supposed to or they shouldn't do. It violates some sort of social faux pas. It violates boundaries that are clearly established in a relationship that's in place, or a boundary that's set up in a friendship. Maybe one party wants to go after a romantic partner, and the other person does it first, or instead, knowing that that their friend was looking for an opportunity to approach this person, and instead of giving a reasonable amount of time or some sort of a hey, well, first, but I'll give you a month. And then, or something like that. The other person just went for it, right? And just went in and snatched him, not even for any relationship, but just to, have a one night thing or whatever. Even.
Mm.
Or this is, or you might have somebody that works their way into an affair and then you catch them on it. Hey, there's this affair happening, da da da. And when you target the person who came into the affair, it's like, yeah, I didn't mean to steal your girl, bruh. But it's anytime somebody's pursuing a romantic relationship, they shouldn't do, because it betrays a boundary or a trust in some way. And the denial will come within, well, I didn't mean to do it, right? First, they're just going to deny it entirely. I didn't do anything with that person, right? I did not have relations with that woman, right? And then it's gonna be, my Alabama accent is lacking. And then it's gonna be, I didn't mean to have relations with that person. It was an accident. Well, we were drinking, see, and it just sort of happened. And then the attack will come. Why would you want them anyway? They're such a insert expletive here. Or, well, if you let someone else get your person or whatever, that's on you. It's not my fault that you're not man enough or whatever. And then the reverse will come when they say, well, actually, it wasn't even really me going after them anyway. They're the bleep. They came on to me, and or even, oh no, yeah, we were just hanging out and they jumped on me. They're trying to destroy our friendship, things like that. And so this is a person that clearly has hurt you in some way, or hurt a friend, or hurt a relationship. They've done some damage, and instead of understanding the damage they did, or talking through or admitting to any sort of wrongdoing, they just come out and deny everything. None of that actually happened. That sort of thing. And there's another term that you gave me for this one, which is, it's very Machiavellian, in that they're sort of out for themselves at the expense of everyone around them.
Yeah, the thing with Machiavellian traits, and when we're talking about psychology, not like the political philosopher, but
not
like
the prince, right?
In terms of, not the prince, but in terms of like psychological traits, there's, we talk about that dark tetrad of the, narcissism, psychopathy, and sadism, and then there's Machiavellianism. And having Machiavellian traits means that it's not sadistic, because you're not actually taking pleasure in the other person's pain or discomfort. And it's not psychopathic, because there's not like this like sense that the rules don't apply to you and you can do anything you want. You kind of get a thrill out of it. It's not narcissistic, because there's not like this like deep sense of you have to inflate your own importance, because there's like something very fragile in there that needs to be protected. Instead, with Machiavellianism, it's just this sense of, I'm going to very coldly calculate how I can get what I want, without really a regard for whether the consequences of that hurt you or anyone else. And it doesn't, the hurting you is not like part of what I want, but if that happens, I don't really care. And that's the Machiavellian trait. And when you were describing this situation, that's what really jumped out to me about this, is that there really does seem to be some Machiavellian aspects here, where the person's just kind of like trying, to get what they want, without, and just get away with it, without basically any regard for their friend or the other person that was involved.
Yeah. And they end up causing a lot of harm, but then that harm and it may even, I don't know, in some cases it may matter to them, but the harm is worth it for what they got out of it in the end, but they're going to pin it on you like it's all your fault, or it's all the other person's fault, or whatever. Try to get out of it as much as they can.
Yeah.
Nuts. And then I have a couple of classic narcissistic family examples. So again, this is not meant for the audience. This is not meant to be guys out there. Thank you for watching, by the way. If you stuck around this long, I can't believe it. Wow. Thank you so much. If you haven't hit like by now, please, this would be a good time. Just right there. Hit it. Well, it's slightly below there, because you see me in the top right of the screen, but it's at the bottom. But just understand that I'm gesturing in that general direction. Anyway, if you haven't hit like by now, please hit like. If you think somebody could benefit from this video, share it with them, please. Hopefully, it's very good information for them. Anyway, so we're going to move us slightly further up so we can read this word here. But I have a couple of what I think were pretty classic narcissistic parent examples of children having to grow up. And in this case, again, both examples I got from my community both happen to be from daughters that don't get along with their mother for
Mm,
some reason or another. In the one case, we have this idea of no contact or low contact families. And usually, what will happen in this case is you'll have a family member who has some sort of extreme narcissistic behavior or tendency, and that causes legitimate harm and trauma in their children. The children will decide to disengage, not have any contact, or that sort of thing. They'll take the disengage option, which is very fine for them to do. And then the parent will blame the child for that. Now,
mhm,
this is not to say that there are no cases in which children do not grow up to be ungrateful and horrible people themselves and don't want to listen to the wisdom of their parents. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is these are pretty clear cases where, you have a parent who's saying things like, I don't understand why my kids don't talk to me. I did everything for them. How can they be so ungrateful to me? Well, it's because the other parent was actually the abusive one. I can't have a relationship with my kids anymore. And so in this first example, you have two daughters. They go totally no contact with their very narcissistic mom. There's this post on like a Father's Day to social media from the mom about how she is so grateful to her father, the grandfather, for being there because her ex-husband was such a bad father. Even her daughters won't talk to her. And this is a form of a DARVO post in the sense that there's a sense of denial here. Um, she even put like, or we'll get to it anyway. I'll get to the end. There's a sense of denial here. It can't be my fault my kids won't talk to me. It's all my ex-husband's fault for telling them things and poisoning their mind, feeding them lies about me, or whatever it was that she conjures gins up that the other parent said, which is ridiculous because the person who told me the story said that the mom actually reached out to her ex-husband to ask, like, why won't my kids talk to me? Like, well, here are some ways that you can get back together with them, try to rebuild the relationship. Just because we don't have anything anymore doesn't mean you can't love your kids. This is kind of why they're upset with you. Here you go, and give her some time to reflect. So whether she did actually experience any abuse or not, we don't know. 100% sure, although it's more in doubt than not, but we don't know, and so that's fair enough if she did. But she did also reach out to him, so not sure. But the denial comes in blaming someone else, right? Even if the father was abusive, why do the children not talk to you? Lots of children
mm,
grow up with one abusive parent and one not, and they love their not abusive parent. So that doesn't make sense to me. Um, the attack in the post came from this person was horribly abusive for 10 years and I couldn't leave, and my father, who I'm so grateful for, kept saying, I'll get you out of there even if I have to go to jail myself or whatever. And then so goes on the attack against the ex-husband, then goes on the attack against the daughters and sends the messages and things. Can you woman up and tell me what you think I did wrong? I really want to emphasize that word there. Tell me what you think I did wrong.
mm,
And this is a great indicator of one of the things I want to talk about before we finally wrap up is how do you know you're the one doing the DARVO? And
mhm,
and when you're saying things like, tell me what you think I did wrong, you're invalidating their feelings. That's a good indicator. And then the reverse comes in. Now my children believe this lie. They won't talk to me. I am now a further victim of my ex husband. When the daughters have been very, very clear to this mom that both of them, that it is her fault and not the father's fault. And they have spent their lives receiving treatment for depression, anxiety, borderline personality, CPTSD. And uh, the the community member who shared this with me said that the decision to finally go no contact came after she was driving, got a text from the mom, and had to pull over her car because she suffered a panic attack that bad just from a text message, just from seeing that her mom sent her a message. She had to stop.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's pretty egregious to me. So just to clear up some things at the end there. So what do you think about that one?
Yeah, that one, the decision to go no contact is such a fraught and terrible decision. It's one of those ones that I think hopefully no one ever takes that lightly. And it's always so hard on families when that happens. But sometimes, and this is one of those times where it literally is, either, your health or this relationship. And sometimes you have to choose your health. You have to choose your life. And but that doesn't mean it has to stay that way forever. And hopefully, as time goes on, there will be ways to make some inroads and bridge here. The thing about the thing about situations like this is that it's it you can't really say just from a description, but
Right.
if this is just if this is a narcissist, it's unlikely that there'll be a lot of change in this kind of behavior. But through luck, luckily this family's in therapy and they're learning some skills. And even if they do reestablish contact, they can do so in such a way where they have some serious like guardrails in place
Hmm.
so that if they're, they might be able in the future to have contact, but have it be done in a way that's very controlled, very disciplined, and where they won't allow any harm to happen.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
a horrible situation. I
Yeah.
don't envy anyone in this kind of a situation. It takes years to heal.
Yeah. And it's a problem, and this is why, and this is why it's important, right? These, when this mom here put like hashtag victim on the post, like, and there, I'm speaking out about this because I'm a victim of a blah 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 blah. And it's hard because to a bystander who knows nothing about the situation, they don't have the insight that I do from my community member. They may just read that flat out and be like, wow, what a victim you are.
Yeah.
That is really horrible. And then that person can go on and kind of build their little echo chamber and box themselves
Hmm.
in, and then none of it has to be their fault. And I guess that's how they
You know,
cope with their shame. I don't know, but
yeah. But to go back to that really important point you made, which is, how do you know when you're not the one that's doing this kind of thing, when you're not, denying, accusing, reversing the victim, and how do you know if it's not you? And I
yeah,
would say like the most important thing when it comes to that is, you know, first, there's actually two most important things.
good.
So the first is getting into good mental habits of self-reflection and emotional inventory. Just from a psychologist perspective, it's remarkable to me how few people really like uh, take time to really take stock of, how they're acting, to self-reflect, things like that. And sometimes this is the thing that's wonderful about therapy is that I will often get people in therapy, and it literally is the first time that they've really thought about their own behaviors and views and beliefs and actions and started to put it all together and think, how am I doing?
Hmm.
Is this all okay? And and so, but once you get in the habit of doing that and you think about that, not that you want to navel gaze all the time, but just get in the habit of self-reflection can be really powerful as a like a almost like a vaccine against this kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
And then the second piece is have a community of people that you are a part of where you feel belonging and you feel trust and and they really do like you and care for you, who will also call you on your bullshit.
yeah,
You really need a community of people who will tell you when you're being stupid and you're acting in a way that's wrong, and especially if you're acting in a way that's harmful to yourself or others.
yeah,
If you don't have people in your life who are willing to call you out like that, then you're in real trouble. And if you don't have people who are willing to do that and you're not self-reflective, then you're real trouble for everyone.
yeah, yeah. It just gets worse. Just gets worse the more that behavior gets reinforced.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a good one, right? Having people that are willing to call you out, because like we saw in the trolling example, anyone can end up being a troll. Anyone can end up engaging in this kind of denial behavior, these kind of tactics. Sometimes it's just reflexive. People don't want to feel bad and they do it. You need to have people who stop you and say, whoa, hey, that was wrong, but also it's going to be okay. We'll fix it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. I may imagine from those studies, you're grumpy. It's a Monday. You haven't had dinner yet. You sit down at the computer and you start firing off something really rude and mean to a total stranger.
Right.
And like people do this sometimes, but luckily if you're online and your friends see what you're saying, they might say right there in the post, "Hey, cut that out. What's
Yeah.
wrong, man?"
Are
Or
you doing
send you a
okay?
message saying, "Are you all right?
Do you need to talk, man?
Yeah, what's up? I'm gonna come over. Let's sit down and eat together, hang out." Like
Yeah.
that, just having folks in your life that see that kind of stuff and are willing to call you out and make sure that you're okay. It's really important.
Well, and often there was a video by Beyond Belief I watched about toxic positivity, which was really, really good. It's about 45 minutes to an hour long. I recommend it to everybody. Beyond Belief is a great channel that I like. As far as
Great
like
name, by the way.
oh yeah,
I love that name.
he's awesome. And he was doing a video on toxic positivity, as he called it, which is just the idea that everything has to be positive. And that it came to mind. You were talking about that, having friends that are willing to call you on your bullshit, because we sometimes get a toxically positive idea of what it means to have friends, and they and good friends don't call us on our nonsense. They don't put us down like that. They always support us. No, bruh. No, no,
Yeah,
Good friends tell you when you're wrong and then help you better so that you can be the
right.
best version of yourself you can be. Everyone's going to do wrong things. Everyone's going to make mistakes, and have people in your life that will help you get through those by first and foremost letting you admit when you did wrong
Yeah,
instead of helping engage in your denial.
exactly. And that again, and I think that's also just part of being a good critical thinker and a skeptic is also having that community of people that value that kind of thing. And when you say I was wrong, their reaction isn't to laugh at you or to put you down, but to applaud that, to say,
Mhm.
"That's awesome, man. That's so cool."
Thank you for pointing that out. So now I can be a better person. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Agreed. And I love that example of, and this is really why I love series like these, is because critical thinking doesn't just help us in academic pursuits or whatever. It helps us in everything. Your whole life is better when you can think critically about it.
It really is.
Okay, so next example, this may be our last example. Hang in there, bear with me, okay? So here we have a daughter who grows up with a narcissistic mom. She has 3 brothers, half brothers. Grows up with the mom and the stepdad, going back and forth between mom and stepdad and dad and stepmom, that sort of thing. Pretty typical divorced, remarried kind of household. Okay. And at the point where they are now all almost adults, all of her brothers have also ceased unnecessary contact with his mom. None of them want to have anything to do with her. So this mom has a suicide attempt and goes to the hospital. Has a suicide attempt, calls the ambulance on herself, goes to the hospital, asks the daughter and the partner to come up and collect personal effects. Hey, can you and your partner come up? To collect these things because I was staying with this guy and I don't want him to rummage through my stuff. Can you go get, all my jewelry and my computer and my hard drive and da 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 da. So this is fine. And among those are some very, very sentimental effects, old photographs of family, grandparents and stuff like that the daughter really wants. So she says, yeah, and I want these old photographs too that you have. And the mom's like, yep, just take everything, get it, everything you can fit in your car and get it out of there. Okay, great. Well, they can't take everything, basement and stuff is too full, whatever, but they do manage to take cases and cases of jewelry, little wardrobe pieces and stuff. They managed to take the computer, the drive, things like that. And there are pictures on the drive that they copy over. And then, but because of family things or whatever, they can't take the bin of photos that they want the day that they're there. And so they arrange to come back and collect more things the next day. with the guy whose house it is, And so he agrees, yep, you can come back tomorrow, da 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 da. So they go back and we're loading up some more stuff. The daughter has her literal hands on the bin that she wanted to take, just so they can scan the photographs and then give them all back. All the originals are going to be returned. All she wants to do is scan them into her computer so that she has these old photos. Mom calls the guy that that whose house they're there at and says, "Nope, don't let them touch anything else. Don't let them take anything else. I want them to stop. I'm going to be out of the hospital soon. I want to go through that stuff." And daughter's furious, leaves the thing behind because that's what was asked, right? And so now for forever have not had these things. 2 years later, even this bin of pictures cannot get transported. So it's years later, just because uh, for whatever reason the mom didn't want to bring them down or whatever for all of this time. And then there's a potential of, well, the things might have gotten flood damaged. I have to go through it and see what was or wasn't. Had she just let the daughter take the stuff, there would have been no fight. We've had everything situated. Things would have been scanned. They would have been returned. It would have been no problem. So they have this fight on the phone, and during the fight, there were many things said, but among them were these specific statements that relate to this. So I'm kind of picking it out. But among them, there were like the denial, right? The mom denies wrongdoing. I wasn't keeping you from these things you said you wanted that I said you could take. I didn't want anything else taken because I was going to get out of the hospital. So now you didn't have to take them, and I could go through it to get it to you, and that way nothing could happen to it if you took it. And then they continue to fight a little bit more. There's another blow up. Well, so it's material things, this accusation of material things. All you care about are these material things that you want. So our whole relationship is all about material things for you, which was a common criticism that this daughter heard all growing up. All you care about is material stuff, right? All you want from me is stuff. All you want from me is to spend money on you. When they are not material things to her, they're sentimental. They're incredibly important because they are grandparents she hasn't seen since they passed away, even pictures of. And all she wanted to do was scan them in. And then the reverse. Now, all of my children hate me because my boy's father, my daughter's father have all poisoned them against me. And all they care about are material things too, because the brother had a sentimental item that she took when she divorced the stepdad. She took all of these sentimental things with her during their divorce. And it's literally the killer part is that she moved across the street. This person she's staying with. So the stepdad's right there. And she knows the stepdad and the daughter and all the sons have a regular contact. She can return anything she wants by literally walking it across the street, putting it down. Right. And that's it. That's literally all it would take. So from one of the sons, she took this bric-a-brac thing, and it got broken. And it was expensive. It was like a collectible from a time they went on a family vacation. And she took this sentimental collectible, and then it broke, and now he won't talk to her anymore. And so it's the same reversal of blame. My children hate me because they're all obsessed with material things. I'm just trying to keep everything safe. I'm just trying to keep everything from being destroyed. It's not even just things like this. It's like old toys that like the daughter wants to pass on to her daughters. It's like old prom dresses that the daughter wants to have back that are really sentimental. This person had a lot to say in there. Okay. But anyway, that's the gist of it. I know that was a lot, but that is a really clear example. And that really is one of the stories that when I heard about this the first time, I was like, I'm going to tell that story. That's nutso.
Yeah. And again, I think it kind of goes back to this thing where I've hit on this a few times where with people that engage in this DARVO thing, it really is because they're motivated by something. I feel like they have some kind of a need they're trying to fulfill. They're trying to protect themselves and not really explain what it is that they really want. And with this mom, it really does seem as though I just kind of wonder if I were to sit down with her and ask her, okay, so what do these objects really mean to you? What is this really about?
Yeah.
You know? why do you want them? Why do you want to keep them? What are these to you? And I have a feeling that if you would start to get down to the root of it, like there's something about holding on to these objects that gives her uh, helps her hold on to these kids
Hmm.
that she's now driving away.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm getting a little too psychological here, but there is something going on with this mom where these objects mean something a lot more than just I want to hold on to them. But her reaction is, I'm going to blame everyone who wants them for being materialistic, you know,
Right.
when she wants them probably for sentimental reasons, they want it for sentimental reasons, and she has a really hard time sharing. And
Yeah.
I don't know why that is,
I don't know.
but there is something there.
It's nuts. It's nuts so to me. And so there's some personal examples. Now, to get into trigger warning again, abuse. Okay. Back to this to really touch on kind of the worst examples of this. In the Harsey and Frade paper, they say, due to its capacity to diminish victim credibility and implicate the victim as being abusive or at least partially responsible for the victimization, it is possible that DARVO discourages victims from speaking out about abuse and provides perpetrators with an advantage in legal settings. They go on to say, regarding the perpetrator and victim gender in the vignettes from the first trial of the experiment, experiment 1, they found that the male victim was rated as overall more responsible for the abuse, and the male perpetrator was rated as less believable, more responsible, and more abusive. And further, they found an interaction effect suggesting that the male victim's believability is disproportionately affected by DARVO. And this was really interesting because I don't say this to appeal to like meninists or whatever, okay? Don't come in here thinking that I support any of that nonsense. But okay, hang in there. But they said while women are more likely to be targets of domestic violence and sustain injury for their partners, that's true. It is also critical that men who are physically abused by women are believed and regarded as legitimate victims. And so we have this interesting situation here where when we talk about anyone can engage in DARVO and they can be seemingly unthreatening, and lots of men don't even report their abuse.
This situation that you're describing here, where you could have somebody who's playing victim who's actually the abuser, this gets extraordinarily complicated.
Yeah.
And there are entire agencies that are set up that really are the focus of the people that are working in these agencies is to try and get at the truth of these things. And even they have just struggle tremendously to get at it, especially in situations like this where where a man is being abused and is maybe potentially trying to hide it, or trying to protect his abuser, or is trying to get help but is also ambivalent about getting help. Those things are really complicated, and
Yeah.
I think the people that do the work in that field for the family advocacy work and the victims' rights work, they're just unsung heroes. They don't get nearly enough credit
Yeah.
for what they do.
Absolutely. And so this shows all the way up to and including criminal proceedings, right? So they talk about in the absence of physical evidence, a victim's perceived credibility is considered by investigators to be one of the most important factors in legal proceedings of sexual assault cases. If we don't have the evidence, what do? Well, we look at who's credible and who said what. But when we employ DARVO, nothing happened. I didn't touch them. Who would even want to anyway? They're so ugly. They're unattractive. Um, that sort of thing. And then the reverse, this person is just trying to ruin me and my reputation, things like this. And again, the whole point of DARVO is that these things all come together in a package, right? It's
Mhm.
they're going to throw out all of them. Not only did I not do anything or didn't do what you say I did, but who would want to anyway? And if anything did happen, it's just them. They wanted it. And if anything did happen, it's them just trying to destroy my reputation, right?
Mhm.
That's an example of like a flat denial. And then you can also deny it in the sense of, well, yeah, you can do the play the hero thing, right? Um or the play the victim thing, like, yeah, something happened, but it wasn't what you think it was. It was a totally consensual thing. They're just an awful, or they're awful and horrible, and they came on to me. I didn't come on to them, and it's them that's actually the assaulter, and it's a whole huge pain.
Yeah. All
So,
right.
and that's where I really wanted to come into, like, when it comes down to it, here are some things that I have, and weigh in on any of these, but again, don't try to win when it comes to family members, friends, whatever. Now, if you're in a legal case, get a good attorney, win that. Let me be clear. Okay. You're going to court, get the best attorney you can, lock that mofo up. That's fine. But when you're talking about toxic friends and family, don't try to win. It doesn't matter how much you love a family member or a friend, or how much you want that relationship with them. If they are narcissistic enough, you will not win them over without sacrificing every boundary you have. And then your life will become their life. And that will cause trauma. So don't do that. It's not worth the trauma. So don't try. If they're not willing to meet you halfway, don't try. Don't meet them all the way, I would say. Support. Remember that your whole family is not this one person. All of your friends are not this one friend. There cannot be any one person who is that important to you that you would put yourself through a toxic relationship for. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's your husband or your wife. Divorce exists for a reason. Like, I don't care who it is. Spend your time and your effort and your energy and your love on people who love you. If that's family and friends you have now that you can shift your support to, fantastic. If not, if it's all your family and friends currently who are toxic, make your own family from people around who care about you. And I don't want to say that that's easy, because it's not. It sucks. It hurts, and you're going to want professional help to get you coping skills through that trauma. It's going to suck, but it's better than the alternative of living someone else's life and letting them abuse you. Don't.
I just want to insert myself on that one a little
Yep.
bit, because that is the moment when people are most vulnerable, because when they know that the family that they're part of, or their support system, is pretty toxic, and they're trying to break away and find like a support group or people that they can belong to, who are going to look out for them and care for them, where they can feel that sense of belonging and have that support. It's usually in that transition, when people are trying to find that group, that they're most vulnerable
Yeah.
to groups that are tailor-made to take advantage of that moment in your life, of, like, extremist religious groups, cults, things like that, or just toxic groups of all different kinds. So I
Yeah.
would just say, if you're in that situation, it's a moment to be cautious and be thoughtful about who you're trying to connect to. Belonging is a fundamental human need. You do need it, and you need to seek it, but just be careful.
Yeah. Agreed. Don't go don't go out of the frying pan and into the fire, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not good. And it's better, in gaming we have this phrase. We say no D&D is better than bad D&D, right? And this is why we can go back to these more fun examples, right? A little bit of levity.
Yeah.
But also because we see how it works, how it's true in that situation, and it's true in everything else, right? If you have to be single for a while, it's better than being with someone who's abusive. It's better than being
Yeah.
with someone who doesn't respect you and doesn't support you. I had somebody message me the other day, and they were like, bruh, can you debunk this conspiracy? And I was like, okay. And they were like, so some dude said to me that, like, women never invented anything. Society doesn't need them. Things would work fine by themselves. And I was like, well, but except for the fact that, like, you can't reproduce without women. So, like, they're already wrong, right? We don't need to think more than 2 seconds into that. And
Mm.
she was like, yeah. And she was like, he just, this guy's just like, well, nobody, no, nobody is, no, we just, it's just that they're basically just like, they're I don't want to say subhuman, but they're just like not as good at anything as men are, or whatever. And I was like, I don't know. Here's a citation of a list of 100 things women have invented. They're just wrong. And she was like, yeah, I could show them, but they probably just won't believe it. And I was like, who even is this person? And she was like, oh, it's my boyfriend. And I was like,
Oh,
dump him.
Yeah.
Fucking
We skip straight to the last
She-
item of
yeah, like
disengage.
just that's see there it is. I do it too, Dr. Dad. I'm just like dump
Yeah.
him. There's no reasoning with that man. None. Just leave. She's like, well, he lives with my family because he's moved in with us. Da da da. And I was like, okay, but that doesn't mean you need to have relations with this man. Like that doesn't mean
Yeah.
you need to be in the same bed with this man. Like if I was with a woman that said that to me, I'd be like, I'm sleeping on the couch for the rest of my life. I don't know what to, even if I could move out, I'd be like, I'm not having anything to do with you. Like, I don't know. I can't, man. That's just nutso. But yeah, I was just like, they're not worth it. And that's what we mean by no D&D is better than bad D&D. No relationship is better than a bad relationship. Like, wash your hands of that shit. You don't need it. Man. Anyway. And then don't take it personal, right? Bad family doesn't mean bad you. Because I came up with this while I was writing this. I hope that's another good one. Bad family doesn't mean bad you. It doesn't matter how bad your family or friends or anyone else is or was to you. You can always break that cycle and do better. Get enough therapy, you get enough support, you get enough love in your life, and you will do better. You can always do better. Stand your ground on these boundaries. When you set boundaries, I don't care how important somebody is in your life. When you set boundaries with them, hold those boundaries. Because people who use tactics like DARVO will try to make you out, like we read in that citation earlier. They'll try to make you the cruel one. They'll make you unreasonable. Be as kind as you can about your boundaries, but never relinquish them. Put on your best customer service face, your best customer service smile, but don't let those go. You don't owe a toxic person anything, ever, any reason. If you do want to or have to engage, be restorative versus retributive. If somebody is respecting your boundaries, if they do start to, and you were talking about this earlier, right? Maybe we can set up some avenues where we can, get these people back in contact or that sort of thing. Have an avenue to restore correction, that's fine. Just make it very explicitly clear exactly what they can do, how they can do it. Maybe they'll come around and maybe they won't. But it's always more productive to try to be restorative, and it gives you a moral high ground, so they can't DARVO you as hard. But for two, it's just more productive than being retributive. Separating yourself from the situation, setting your boundaries and standing your ground, and giving them an avenue to a way to respect those boundaries is more productive than telling them to go unalive themselves, I think.
For sure.
Bystander intervention matters here too. Be there however you can. I understand it's complicated. Be there how you can for people who are victims of abuse and help them find the support they need. If you can't be their support, give them ways to get support. However you can help them, be there to help them. You would want someone to help you if it was you. And that doesn't mean you have to be everything for them. That doesn't mean your whole life goes on hold for this person necessarily. But it does, like, if there's something you can do, then do it. Even if it's just support, words of support, affirmation. You are not crazy. You can get out. You can do better. This person is nuts. You don't have to listen to that. Or, me telling you to dump them. I don't know. Having that, taking the time to call out the toxic behavior and explain to this person. And sometimes it's because people will be in abusive situations and then just think that that's normal or that that's okay because of parts of their upbringing or their dogma that they subscribe to or whatever. There are a lot of people, for example, in extremist religious cults, basically, that women who deal with tons of misogyny, they should never have to deal with because somebody points to an old book and says, well, in my old book, it said a real wife is a wife who blah, 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 blah. A real wife is a wife who never denies her husband. And so you should always give me what I want every day, no matter what, no matter how you're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
It's dumb because people think marital rape is not a thing. And it is. And it is. So be there for people. Be the voice of reason to tell them when people in their life are being absolutely insane. Limits and priorities help here too. If your boundaries are very well established, make them very, very clear. Make sure that every interaction is well understood, exactly what's allowed to be said, what's allowed to be done, etc., etc. Because if you don't set up the clear limits and the priorities and remind them and enforce them, then they will push your boundaries everywhere possible. Stand your ground on those. Don't budge. Keep your receipts. If you can, have conversations by text, email, written letter, whatever. Everything then can be documented and recorded. Screenshot it. Keep a diary, even if it's for your own sanity. To keep yourself grounded, keep a diary. If nothing else, it helps kind of minimize the effect of having your sanity questioned all the time. Record conversations if it's allowed in the forum that you're talking in. Whatever you can do to keep things written down and written out. When I worked in management, we used to do that a ton. I mean, we would email everything so that everything you said just got documented in email after email after email. We never let anything go without an email. If anything happened, where we worked, you're going to write an email, send it to HR, write an email. HR needs an email. Make sure you write it down, put it in an email. What are the timestamps on the camera? So you can go look at the camera, all that stuff. Got to have your receipts. And then finally, and this is where, I'll jump to disengage first. I don't care.
Yes.
And if you're talking with toxic people, there is nothing wrong with going no contact with toxic people. It hurts, but there's nothing wrong with it. Don't owe them anything. Your life is too short to cater to them. You live your best life and live it for the people who love you and the people who have your interest at heart, not theirs. Your life is not their life. They got their one life. You don't need to be their second one. And you don't need to put up with their nonsense if it's causing hurt and trauma in you. It doesn't matter how much you love them. It doesn't matter how much they say they love you. You can love somebody and not put up with their nonsense, with their behavior that is causing you harm in your life. You can just let it go, disengage. And then if you decide you want to restore things, have really clear boundaries, but disengage, dump toxic people. No relationship is better than bad relationship. No D&D is better than bad D&D. Okay. No comment is better than trolling. And that is really one of the things that is like one of the fundamental cornerstones, I think, of this entire conversation that has gone on way too long. Thank you so much for being here. Is that, I can't thank you enough. Holy shit. Is that disengaging yourself is better than being in a bad situation. And do not let someone deny, do not let someone attack you, and do not let someone reverse something. If you can walk away and don't be a part of it. These are our citations.
All right.
Any last comments, Dr. Dad?
I would just say that if you are dealing with people that are using these kinds of techniques on you or trolling you or something like that, take a break from all of it. Talk to someone who cares about you. Get outside, walk in some grass with no shoes on. Go play with some kids who just want to get in the dirt and get away from it all for a while. And I think you'll feel a lot better.
Yeah. Do something that you enjoy to clear your head. Come back. Try again if you need time. Because when you're stuck in it, it's hard to think clearly about it. Clearing your head helps a ton. A ton. And for the last time, hey, if you need a community of people who will accept you, come hang out with us, game with everyone. I promise we are not one of the communities Dr. Dad would tell you to be wary of when you're feeling vulnerable. I, in fact, will not do that. I will direct you to places like Psychology Today, where you can go type in your zip code if you live in America, and I'm pretty sure most places around the world, and just find a therapist to talk to. Please. Yep. Because again, I said this last time we were on here, and I'll say it again. I cannot recommend therapy enough when you're having a hard time, because therapy has saved my life twice. Mm-hmm. I would not be here today without two very, very good therapists to talk to about the things that were troubling me. And I can't thank you enough. These are our citations. Citations will be posted in the link in the description below. Thank you, everybody. Again, if you found that this was useful in any way, please share it around. We'd be happy to. If you want to have a discussion about it, leave a comment down below. Just tell me your thoughts. If you want to leave a comment for Dr. Dad, tell him your thoughts. We're happy to take them on and all of that good stuff. If you have insights to share, we would love for you to share them. The conversation can only grow from here, and I'm not perfect, right? So there may be things that I missed out. If you feel compelled to share like a traumatic story, I don't want to discourage you from doing that, but I would just say don't use a YouTube comment section to vent your trauma, use a therapist. That's their job. So please go to therapy with that trauma. And then also, you can talk to us about it. That's fine. But if you do feel like you want to leave a comment, talk about something troubling to you, my encouragement is going to be, please take that to a therapist and get that resolved before you put that out online. Very comfortable feelings on. What else? Anything else? Yeah, all of that sort of thing. Know that you are loved, and there are people in the world who do love you, and you are important, and you do matter, and you are special, just the way you are. And there are people who will bring you in and accept you. You do not need toxicity from anyone, so don't take it. Don't take it from anybody, and do the best that you can with the situation you're in. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And remember, my friends, don't hate, don't discriminate, love forever, and play together. Good night, everybody, and thank you very much for watching today.
Bye.